Come on now. Come on, Sister Sophia. Brandon won't stop calling me that. He's like, "Good morning, Sister Sade." I said, "Stop. Please stop." It was an accident.
I think that's funny.
Accident.
Did you start?
Yeah.
Oh shit. Should I?
Copyright.
I'm just kidding.
Shanti, I'm going to explain all this news.
I can do this.
No, of course not. It's not all in vain.
Let's get, we're going to get started. Then we're going to play music after preschool.
Yes, take us to church.
That's right.
We're really going to church. Two services better than one.
Are we live?
Yes.
Well,
We live.
I guess I want to say Merry Christmas to everybody and whatever else is being celebrated.
Happy holidays.
That's right, happy holidays.
Happy Hanukkah.
Yeah,
Moms are not to the 26th.
yeah. But definitely these are secular holidays for the majority of people. But secular, all that's secular is not without the sacredness of human bonding, human love. And people today are treating people better, kinder, because people collectively know that these are days that we should hold as special. And this is not, it's not just religion. And by the way, this holiday is really German and Northern European, because actually all accounts say that Jesus was not born in this time of the year. It was more towards the spring, but it's celebrated this time of the year. So I just want to say that. So, I mean, I guess for people who can see us, we have eggnog, and we have cake, and we have fruit, and we have, what else do we have?
Good tidings.
Good tidings for all. And we've been listening to some great church music. If you don't know, the great Rance Allen, we'll talk more about him, and the great Donnie McClurkin. And we were listening to the great Aretha Franklin. And then my dear colleague and associate in crime, Serafina, put on the Clark sisters. And the interesting thing is so much of this contemporary Black music is out of the industrial Midwest. And it is the music in a lot of ways of the proletariat. You know what I'm saying? And to understand the working class, I think, is to understand the music. And like Du Bois said about the sorrow songs, the rhythmic narrative of a disappointed people. But we'll talk more about this. I was playing it for Emily and Alice as we were coming over here. And then I was playing a little bit for Sade and Seraphine, and I was telling Michelle a little bit about it. But, oh, by the way, they're the best musicians, the best singers in the Black community never go into secular music. Some do, but the best singing and the best music is in the church. There's no two ways about it. That's why I was playing Rance Allen and Donnie McClurkin. And I love Luther Vandross. If you don't know him, check him out. Great Luther Vandross. I mean, just so many of the R&B and blues singers. But what goes on in that church, and the thing that's so profound about it, the level of singing and musicianship is high, because those people that follow church singers and church music, their level of understanding of music is very high. So what could get over in, like, let's say a singer or a group that's on tour every night, every other night they're performing, the level ain't going to be that high. But the level of secular music is not as high as this. And we were listening to Rance Allen. It's very difficult to imagine a voice better than his. He's a virtuoso singer with a deep message from within his heart and within his soul. And, just like with Hinduism, the allegories, the stories. And, even though I studied with some Hare Krishnas, the Gitas, yeah, I did. I can't say I understood them, but because of the allegory, the allegorical character, and these stories and what they relate to. And of course, so much of religion is stories and allegories, except this is what we, oh God, I don't know why I'm talking about this, but there are religions of the book. Judaism and Hinduism, and Islam are more religions of law. God said, and thou shalt, and thou shalt not. Christianity is a religion based upon the life of Jesus. And therefore, when Rance Allen and them talk about evil and good, the temptations that life presents for people, they're talking about real things, but in allegorical terms, which it just fits music so well, and then me and Seraphina were listening to them chords, those contemporary chords, because it's not the same as the blues chord that you hear in Retha. Retha comes straight up. That's the way I feel about you. I was saying to Michelle, that's the way I feel about you. The phrasing and all this shit, man. But that's more the blues. She's hitting hard. But Rance Allen and then they come in with more contemporary chords. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, they hearing all the music out there, but they're not going into the secular world. They're keeping it in the church, in the spiritual world, really in the moral, the world of morality. Like Donnie McClurk would talk about stand. Those times when everybody turned their back on you, where you thought you had friends. Don't give up. Stand up, get up the next day and keep going. But this is beautiful stuff, and to understand it is to understand existentially working people, and it is the greatest music ever produced in this country, and maybe among the best music of the modern epoch. It is so deep, so inspirational, so connected to humanity, and it really is. And I was just listening, and trying to understand a people in the throes of struggle, but who could be the foundation of a new people, a new nation, which is the free school, the 10th anniversary. Because revolutions are made by people, not by theorists. I will text Emily, and she writes long texts, and I'm forced to write long texts. And
No, you started.
Did I start that? Oh, sorry.
Let the record
Oh, well,
show.
the other one is Sade,
Yeah,
and I still haven't answered all
He
your
was like, I can't answer.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah, I mean-
oh, you started it.
I mean, she's asking me about John Maynard Keynes, and I said, well, I can't text on that one. Maybe Danny can.
That's funny.
But
Out you.
what did you say?
He's trying to out her.
Yeah, it's all right.
Okay, I'm outing her as a closeted economist.
Wait, trapped in the closet? No, trapped in the closet.
Oh, no. Are you talking about R. Kelly?
That was M.
Yeah.
That was M.
I bought it. I bought the whole thing.
You did?
The
We're not
32
watching-
episodes, Trapped in the Closet. It's
Okay, wait, go ahead. Which one?
well, I'm not
Oh,
going
so
to
that thing is
Trapped.
long.
You would love this.
Yeah.
It's a satire.
What's it about?
It's a satire on people who are
It's a
trapped
lot.
in many closets.
It's a lot.
You know.
Oh, that's gonna be a theatrical.
Yeah. Did y'all see the midget?
No.
When he came? Yeah. I don't want. I prefer not to talk about these
So you're
sensitive.
saying you were texting M?
Huh?
You're texting Emily.
You were texting Emily about something that was
Oh, a
too
new
long.
nation.
Oh yeah, a new. No, we were. We were looking at the critique of Gerald Horn's book. Another young man wrote a critique. I haven't finished reading it yet, but
Yeah.
Gerald Horn again, and I think rightfully so. It is such a, first of all, and they're young Midwest Marxists. And, how could I say, young guys finding their way. And, there's certain, when you're young, you want everything to come quickly. You know what I'm saying? I hate to say that, but you want everything right away, and everything can be easily grasped. No problem. Age question, young man question, heightened by YouTube. So now I can be a star on top of that. But it's all good. It's all good. But they need mentorship. They need, somebody to say, but I'll explain it to you. But it's a great review, a great further development from the review. I think most of y'all have seen the review on the World Socialist website. And so they had him on, they were discussing it. And this book by Horn is a complete disaster and an embarrassment to him. An embarrassment. The young man that wrote the review, he says on the first page, he gets not just a factual wrong, but Gerald is, I was going to say locked in the closet. No, not locked in, he's not in the closet, but he locked himself in. And that's what they didn't understand, what the young men on the Midwest Marxist did not understand, is the role of the collapse of the Soviet Union. And then people like Gerald and others said, now we have to discover a new way. But see, there was a mistake in his understanding of the world communist movement, if he even understood it. And I say this with all due respect. I say this knowing him, having known him. I mean, I knew him so well. The guy stayed at my house, and I, all good, But so the collapse of the Soviet Union, the world communist movement was over, and therefore, without a Soviet Union, without a world communist movement, what becomes of the international class struggle, the international struggle for national liberation and for peace against war and all of that? What happens? And for him, what happens is that, let me put, what he assumed is as long as there was a Soviet Union, the weaknesses in the working class in the United States could be trumped, if you will, by the existence of a world communist and world socialist movement. You see what I'm saying? Weaknesses, but the weaknesses of the American working class cannot be separated from the enormous power of the US ruling class. Never, ever has there been such a powerful ruling class with such means, ideologically, propagandistically, militarily, the intelligence services, the whole thing, never. So many people, and we talked about this, went towards social democracy. I'll never forget all of these crocodile tears. Oh, I didn't know, and if I had known, if you're a revolutionary, stand up and be grown. Be a grown man and woman. We take our setbacks along with our victories. Ain't nobody trying to, you thought this was going to be, Disneyland. Well, okay, now you know it's not. Other people like Horn said now the US working class, the majority of whom are white, will, all of their, quote, weaknesses ideologically will be allowed to express themselves. And so he then takes the election of Trump as a sign, I'll say a sign, more than a sign, a demonstration, I guess, of the inherent fascist, racist qualities, not just tendencies, qualities inherent to the white working class. Hence, he looks, it's what they call presentism, which some historians, that is, trying to make a case about the present based upon your interpretation of the past. Now, that is not always wrong, because you can show logics of history. But in Horn's case, what he does, and this is, it's breathtaking that a person who has seemingly achieved so much in the historical profession, which now a lot of things have to be brought in question based upon these current research projects. Gerald Horn distorts historical facts in order to make a case about the present. So his idea is that the United States, with the election of Trump, now that's a huge assumption. The election of Trump represented the seizure of government power by a fascist and a fascist movement. Once you go there, you're in a realm of political drunkenness. You become hysterical. And that's what you see in Horn, a person who cannot understand or grasp the contradictions of the present moment. And therefore, he becomes hysterical, like much of the, quote, left, anti-Trump no matter what. Well, Biden is taking us closer to nuclear war. That doesn't count. We have to fight fascism. Come on, man. You know what I'm saying? It's hysteria. That's what it is. For Horn, he believes, I think, that he is providing a historical materialist grounding for anti-fascism ideologically. Does that make sense? I don't... Now, so he writes this book, The Counter-Revolution of 1776. The British Crown was moving towards abolition of slavery. The American Revolution was to uphold slavery. It is so wrong. First of all, every single revolutionary of the 20th century and even earlier had seen the American Revolution as the first anti-colonial and the first bourgeois democratic revolution, with all of the contradictions inherent therein. Frederick Douglass didn't say, it's over. Frederick Douglass said, history demands that we resolve the contradiction between liberty and slavery. Simple. Horn takes a position so extreme as to be absurd and ridiculous. And then, of course, he's a highly paid professor, over $200,000 a year, just on salary. It's just absurd. But the Midwest Marxists, take it up very nicely, very good job. But then I'm listening to them and I'm saying, one of them, he tries to talk with a hoarse voice like a worker, something like that. I can't imitate. And when he says bourgeoisie, he says it in a way that's supposed to sound like, because I heard cats back in the days that came out of the 30s who would, talk, have a certain accent. He's trying to imitate, I think. I don't think but anyway.
Okay.
But what they are trying to do, yes, there's a need for a advanced theoretical understanding of Marx. There's no question about it. There is a need, especially in a time like this, for theoretical development and sophistication, but to get locked in certain texts that, and I'm not saying they don't have to know this. They don't have to know, they have to learn how to do it. Not connected to your own country and your own people, especially the Black proletariat. I mean, it's just such a glaring weakness. I attribute it to youth and inexperience. When I say youth, it's in their late 30s, 40s, I call it. I'm not going to say king size babies, but it's, especially when your own country is perhaps on the cusp of a fundamental change. Nobody can guarantee it will happen, but in a crisis like this, the chances that it will happen are higher than in a period when there's not a crisis like this. Nobody who understands revolutionary science, Marx, and especially Lenin. I want to say something about Lenin. Nobody that understands any of this could in the name of theoretical purity, distance themselves from the day-to-day lives of their own people, who are pushing and tugging and trying to find a way out of this crisis, and even looking towards a new system. It's there. It's there. We see it crystallized when we go to Black churches. Going to the Church of the Overcomer tomorrow for Christmas service. You don't think they understand a new social system has to replace this one? I mean, you don't even have to argue the point. You know, you go to the mosque, 12, 25, or wherever. I mean, it's very clear. But this is not, they're fine points of Marx and German ideology or the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte. You know, I mean, it's a beautiful thing if you have time to, you know, revisit these wonderful texts and essays. But an obsession with that is too academic, too academic at a time like this. You know what I'm saying? At a time like this. But then at a time like this, to talk about the proletariat in these abstract ways and to not understand what Du Bois was doing in Black Reconstruction. Now, they mention it, but they do not understand it. And I'm certain, you know, in their theorizing and thinking, Du Bois is a derivative thinker rather than an originary thinker. That's sad, because you'll never understand your own nation and its possibilities without it. Now, the other thing is Lenin. Lenin is the greatest Marxist after Marx, greater than Engels. Lenin is a political giant. You know, and I didn't always understand Lenin, his life, you know, his exile. He was in Switzerland when the Germans offered him a seal chain. That's a train with a, what is it like when you put a, you know how you all have on your windows? Dark, huh? Tinted windows. Well, he had a sealed train. So the Germans sealed. In other words, no one could see what was inside. And the Germans, who were fighting the Russians, secretly brought him back in April of 1917 to Russia. You know what I'm saying? And the fact that he accepted it, because here he's going back. I mean, this could not have been a more unpopular thing for a man and a party who were minuscule. I mean, people, I mean, we read it today, it's like the Bolsheviks and they were The Bolshevik Party, to put it mildly, is Lenin's invention. That's how bold he was. But it was an invention to transmit his ideas to the masses. Let me go back on that. You know, like a lot of people today, they want to promote ideas and ideology. They get a university job and publish books. You know what I'm saying? Well, there was no, I mean, no way, shape, or form Lenin or any other Marxist in the early part of the 20th century could get a university job and keep it. The press, mainstream media wasn't publishing them. Lenin understood the necessity of a mechanism to advance ideologies of revolutionary change. That's what the Bolshevik Party was. It was Lenin's party. And I will argue that all day and all night long. It was him. You can call him a narcissist, but he was it's hard to explain a person like that, so iron-willed and so confident in his ideas and his visions of revolutionary change in Russia. He said one of the things that we need is a political party, and it would be a Russian political party, which meant that as a left political party, it would be illegal. So they were underground. Most of them were in exile in other countries, you know. But it was a vehicle to advance ideas. It's not that's why he argues against terrorism, anarchism, all of the ideas that he was against, as in his interpretation, which was not merely an interpretation of Marx, but it advanced Marx. It really fucking did. I mean, you know, and so it's legitimate to talk about Marxism, Leninism. Lenin, my opinion, is the equal of Karl Marx. And you know, we studied when we're doing science of logic. You know, we did a lot of things, but I like the way Lenin approaches philosophy. Philosophy is politics by other means. You know, for Lenin, nobody gets off, escapes the political gaze. I'm not going to just treat you as a philosopher. For Lenin, what side of the struggle are you on? Right. And I'm going to hold your feet and your ideas to the fire. That approach to philosophy is the best approach because, you know, otherwise you can get, you know, I mean, if you want to be a professional philosopher, go ahead and, you know, do whatever they do in academic circles and this, that, and the other. If you see philosophy as this great, as Hegel said, science of sciences, or if you see it as a part of the ideological configuration of society and of class, when you see it that way, it all makes sense. It makes better sense than to look at it in this museum style of studying philosophy. I mean, so Lenin took on the whole ideological geography of the modern world at that time and said what was revolutionary and what was not. And that's what makes the guy so appealing. And that's why, interestingly, you can go to any major university, especially the Ivy League, and you can take a course on Marxism taught by a, quote, Marxist, right? Yeah, and I'm not hating, you know, nor am I celebrating, but you know, but the thing is, there is never a course on Lenin, as though Lenin undermined or deformed Marx, when it's the complete opposite. Leninism is the advanced form of Marxism in the period where revolution was a real possibility. By revolution, the seizure of state power. And by revolution, we're talking about a socialist revolution, not a bourgeois revolution, when it was possible. And Lenin saw that, he believed in it, he fought for it, and he never stopped fighting for it. I think the Russian Revolution was Lenin's project. His name can easily be stamped on it. That doesn't mean that thousands of people did not storm the Winter Palace, that ultimately the Bolsheviks were able to put together a coalition that formed a government, and then they, but the very idea of the first socialist revolution being in what was considered a backward country, that the world system, and that's another thing Lenin saw, a world system. And that revolution was a world process, and the system could break in many places. That's what we're experiencing today. This world system that could break at any moment in many different places, including in the United States. Which is why the quote, "We are fighting fascism" crowd can see neither revolution nor world system. So I think the Midwest Marxist, like anybody, they need mentorship. And I would say that to them. I mean, you can sound sophisticated, you can sound erudite and academic and all of that. But who is your audience? Who are you trying to convince? You can convince me and I'm saying, oh yeah, man, you down, this, that, and the other. But me and you together can't make a revolution. The audience has to be that class, and really that part of the class which is advanced and in a crisis like this can move to the forefront, to the vanguard. And that's why Du Bois is so important, and why in most senses Lenin advanced Marxism as far as Marxism could go. And by that I mean the body of Marxist works, his studies of revolution and counter-revolution in Europe, the peasant question, all of these questions, and of course Das Kapital and the whole revolutionizing of political economy. But then after that, what do you do? What is the next stage? Has the system changed? And Lenin said it had. It become something new, something different, yada, yada, yada. If you were to ask me, I don't believe that Marxism can be advanced any further than Lenin took it. Now, we can do a, quote, Marxist analysis. I would say better yet, a Leninist analysis of the financial crisis, the financial system, all of that, based upon, certain foundations of Marxist political economy, labor theory, value, exploitation, yada, 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 yada. If you want to discover where the revolutionary agency exists, that is a different question. Because where the revolutionary agency, the revolutionary forces exist in one period, it does not have to be the same in another period. You see what I'm saying? So I say all of that just to reference back to this discussion at the Midwest Marxist, where they asked the author of the article. No, this was a question put forward by Danny himself. Yeah, yeah. Danny's in the mix.
Danny himself.
Yeah. Yeah. Danny asked, how do you explain this theory having Horn's theory having so much appeal to leftists at this time? And so they got back to that question at the end, and the author of the article said, well, because they're not anti-communist, they're not anti-communist party. In fact, they are more for the Communist Party going back to the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. They liked that Communist Party. But they felt that the left and the Communist Party suffered from the fact of deindustrialization. For example, in the 30s, union organizing, workers' uprisings in the industrial Midwest. By the industrial Midwest, they're talking about Michigan, Detroit, Gary, Indiana, Cleveland, Ohio, all of these places of industry, heavy industry. And if you ever drive through the Midwest, you'll still see these huge factories totally empty. Totally empty. And that represents the deindustrialization and the diminishment of the working class, of unions, and so on. So the young guys said, well, look, the Communist Party's strategy was based upon the industrial proletariat, the most integrated part of the working class, especially in the auto industry. You know what I'm saying? I said racially integrated. He says that the lack of a industrial proletariat base for the party's policies. He said a couple of other things I forget right off the top of my head. And I just wanted to say to him that even with deindustrialization, and I think the party had the capacity, especially with the leadership that we identified with Winston and other people, that, and I was aware of, the party was in the process of adapting its policy to the new conditions. Weaken unions by numbers, attack upon unions by deindustrialization, all of that. It could have adjusted. Why not? I mean, no. And in fact, I saw those possibilities. And I guess without fully understanding, I may have been I was a part of helping to forge a new approach. By the way, the new approach was rooted in the assumption of what we today call the Third American Revolution. That's why Winston elevates King as such an important figure. This was very, very important. So we could adjust. The working class itself would have to adjust. How would it fight? And so on. So you have to find that, you're always doing that. That's ideology and politics, if that's what you're about. But what they did not see, and this was the key thing, the collapse of the Soviet Union and the rise of what they call a professional managerial class, the universities, and they did get this right, the role of the universities, the media, and the nonprofits. Oh, they call it an iron triangle. They got that right. Or they could have added the, which we'll talk about in a minute, the security services like FBI, CIA, and that type of thing. The collapse of the world communist movement the Communist Party of the United States could not survive it. We did not survive the rise of Gorbachev. We didn't. The party split. Some of the best communists went the wrong way. I don't want to name names now. By this time, Winston was dead, so you didn't have that anchor, that rudder that could guide it. But that was a big thing. That explains, well, a whole generation, including yours, who have no idea of what a world revolutionary process looked like. Never saw it, no way to study it, you know, and are more predisposed towards cultural questions like gender and race, using this cultural sense. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. They have to see more than Marx. Frankly, you know, it does require a lot more humility than they are able to muster. They think, and you know, a lot of people back in the days, if you were a Marxist, you knew it all. You knew more. You were smart. You had the answers. And that's not true at all. You know, I won't get into all of this. That's why, you know, it's so necessary to be connected to the people, wherever they are. If you can't get to the people through the unions, you go through the churches. If you can't do the churches, go through the fraternities and the Masons and the community organization. You know what I'm saying? If they cut you off in one place, you find the people. Because there is no revolutionary theory that does not hear the voice of the people. That's politics. I don't care whether it's bourgeois revolutionary politics. Politics is the art and science of mobilizing people to achieve certain things. You know what I'm saying? It's just that simple. I can't be a revolutionary in some university seminar. I'm not close to the people. I got to hear the people. Tactics are based upon what people are capable of, what they're prepared to do. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Emily. You want to say something?
No.
You might want to say something.
Well, I mean, there are comments, but I just want to say, like, hearing you talk, it also made me realize, like, when you said that our generation, but also maybe even the previous one, like, we're generations that grew up without a world revolutionary process. But even how you described the fact that we also don't, when you, like, especially our generation, we grew up with nonprofits and universities that have already become subservient to the ruling class. And it reminded me of why I think Du Bois, yes, Black Reconstruction, but even like Russian America.
Yes.
What he's also doing is I feel like in some ways Du Bois, with his final manuscript that never got published, he's trying to describe a certain stage of history. Like in some ways he's talking about the importance of the Soviet Union, but also how devastating, what's it called again? The Cold War, McCarthyism was. Because I'll never forget when Du Bois makes it a point to say, universities, any positive aspects of universities and what they could do to help produce knowledge for the people is gone. Like he said, any professors who were even just like slightly dedicated to the truth were wiped out by McCarthyism. And so you're left with shells. Like you're left with shells of academia. Universities at that point become like there's no hope for them. And that's he's writing this in like the 50s, I think.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just wanted to make that point. Like that we're a generation that never even got to see, we never got to experience that world revolutionary process. And that's also why, like you said, it's important to have mentorship, to have the humility to seek, like, even if you don't have a mentor, to have the humility to seek like history written by Du Bois, like to at least get some sense of like the truth of what happened, and it helps explain the crisis today, and who you can trust, who you can't trust. And like you said, ultimately the only thing you can trust is the people. You have to always go back to the people. But yeah, there's more, but I'm still just thinking it through.
Say that again.
I'm still just thinking like through everything you said. But I also just love the way you said, like, it doesn't even matter if it's bourgeois politics, revolutionary politics. Politics at the end of the day is the art and theory of mobilizing the people to achieve something. Yeah, I just want to, I guess, underline that. That was...
And that's really what it is.
Yeah.
You know, if you think revolution is about who has it right in terms of Marxist labor theory of value or the declining rate of profit, if you think that's what it's about, you need to get in another business. That's not revolutionary business. It is about the people. And, you know, it's better to have one dedicated revolutionary who might be able to read or might not be able to read or write or understand philosophy than to have 1,000 academics who are so self-assured that they know it all and can quote this or the other one of Marxist texts. I mean, that's all nice, you know what I'm saying? And it's good for people, especially when they're young, to read a lot of that. But, you know, when you become an adult, you have to do adult things. And adult things, just like adult things means like paying your rent or your mortgage or your water bill. You know, mommy and daddy are not going to pay for it now. You got to get a gig, you got to pay, you know. So you face the world, and you have to deal with issues of the world. That's adulthood. And the more experience you have in trying to deal with those things, the more of a grown person you become. Now, a lot of people try to have a foot in each camp. I'm going to be boyish or girlish. At the same time, I'm going to also be a responsible person, you know, in terms of paying my bills. But at some point, even that contradiction has to be resolved. You know, you're no longer a cute little girl, or you know, you got to do, you know, you have to realize I want to be judged on what's inside. You know, because the more adult you become, hopefully the more complex, the more depth you have on the inside. So you put childish things away. That's all I'm saying. You know, I'm totally put off by grown men who their richest conversation is about the Eagles.
They know a lot about the Eagles.
They do. I mean, it's amazing how much they know.
What this basketball, baseball, football? It's confusing.
I love it when
It's amazing how much some people can know about such trivialities.
Yeah,
You
and
know.
they actually get intellectual about it. Is the
Oh
funny
my
thing.
Yeah, or pseudo-intellectual.
Yeah, I mean, they really put their brains to work.
Oh yes,
gymnastics.
absolutely. Go ahead, Paul.
No, I just wanted to ask what people think about this, because I read the review that you're talking about, talk of Gerald Horn, and well, it was a good review in the sense that they point out a lot of things that are difficult to unsee in the book, but it did feel like it was missing something, and it did feel like it did not understand Du Bois and what he brings to the table, the great contribution, like you were saying. And I was thinking that one of the things that it completely seems to miss, in the Marxist analysis, we're trying to analyze this from a Marxist perspective. It completely, I think, it seemed to disregard the world anti-colonial movement and the American Revolution as a part of it, like it was seen by revolutionaries in Asia, like
Yes.
Ho Chi Minh and
Yeah.
Mao and
Yeah.
Sukarno and all of them. And I think we've talked about this before, but Du Bois really, like, it is he, when he is like, he's synthesizing Marxism and Leninism, but he brings the civilizational and the world anti-colonial movement into the whole picture as a revolutionary process of the peoples of Asia and Africa, which I think if you don't consider in your analysis, you're missing this, like you're missing really this, I don't know, groundbreaking movement of a people.
Right, no question.
And if you see the American Revolution as it was in 1776 to be a part of it, I mean to say that you have to see it as a part of that. And I felt like that was completely missing. It was more on academic lines, the disagreements with Horn's arguments and so on. But yeah, I just wanted to know what people think about that.
Also, no, just in terms of the Midwestern Marxist article, I did appreciate that they have the question about like how Horns basically, so like it was like, okay, the British was good because they what was it? Say it again.
It was basically they were saying at least the British were abolitionists.
Right, we're abolitionists, and then I knew I was just gonna mess it up really quick, or the Americans were gonna try and keep slavery or whatever. I saw that they saw that question, but I think that another question that they might need some clarification on possibly was this like colonialism, like how we were talking about last week about the relationship between the southern slaves, the English, and India. That and I think that is also part and parcel with how they understand Du Bois. Like if they know Du Bois, then they would see that connection more clearer. And same thing what you said about Frederick Douglass, how history is requires.
Right.
And the same thing goes for us. Like we were talking about last week, the importance of King and Du Bois and all these things, and the tradition of it requires us to not only know of it but continue it and birth.
Absolutely.
So
And to fight for its
And fight for
legacy.
its
Yeah, I
legacy,
agree
yeah.
with that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, something that we said last time, which was very clear, which is that Gerald Horn's analysis essentially obscures the role of class in terms of in history, because even though, like, even in this narrative that like Britain or was like anti-slavery or abolitionist, and the U.S. was for slavery, obscures actually the class distinctions within the U.S. and also in Britain. Because I don't fully understand it, but I know in our discussion of Black Reconstruction, it was mentioned that in Britain, the ruling elite actually initially sided with the South.
Yes.
And the Southern planters. It was actually the workers, and because they had sided, or the workers, like over time, had seen, and
You're talking about in the Civil War.
during the Civil War, but the workers in Britain, during the time of the Civil War.
Right.
During the time of the Civil War, essentially, a movement came about the workers that opposed the government in intervening on behalf of the South. And that's not something like I haven't read Gerald Horn yet, but it doesn't sound like he even teases out that like nuance. Instead, it's this blanket statement of Britain and then also the U.S., which obscures essentially the class piece to everything. And then on a separate note, what Purva, you were saying on the anti-colonial struggle during the 50s, 60s, this is actually a point that Catherine brings up about the anti-war or Vietnam War sentiments in the U.S., which is actually until people like King and Muhammad Ali, it was actually very white. And the whole thing is that, you know, many people were going into universities, into Canada to escape the draft to go to Vietnam. But the deficiency essentially is that there wasn't someone that actually tied what was happening in Vietnam to the world situation. Would you say that is also what you had experienced in that time or seen in terms of the Vietnam War protests, and then it's like isolation from what the world situation is until there is someone like King and Muhammad Ali?
Probably, I would agree. You know, the anti-Vietnam War movement begins as an anti-draft movement.
Yeah.
So it was really students
Yeah.
Wow.
That's interesting.
who were trying to get out of the draft. About 200,000 at the end had fled to Canada or other places, like cats like Bill Clinton. They,
I didn't expect that.
I don't think he did.
yeah, I mean,
You went to Canada?
I didn't know.
he went to England.
Oh, okay. That makes more sense.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Same thing. It's the same thing.
now, you know, so interesting, you know, movements and times of crisis sometimes produce the best in people. John Kerry, the senator, you know, he was well known. He was in Vietnam. He fought in Vietnam. But when he came back, he became a part of an organization called Vietnam Veterans Against the War. And they were a very, very powerful force, symbolically and politically and otherwise, you know. But then many of those who could, went to Canada and England and maybe other countries. But then others stood and fought. I guess I was one of those. I said, I ain't going nowhere. You know, you do what y'all got to do. I'm gonna do what I got to do. And I was serious as a heart attack about that. And others were. I mean, I wasn't no great eye and all that shit because there was no one comparable to Muhammad Ali. I mean, he literally began, just his symbolic stand, began a insurrection among Black troops in Vietnam. You know, because they were over there, the ones, you know, had some conscience and said, wait a minute. Now they were drafted out of high school, some of them were on their way to jail for small crimes. And the judge said, well, if you sign up to go to Vietnam, you don't have to go to jail. Where do I sign? You know? Yeah, all that nickel and dime, that's espionage. But when King gives that speech in 1967 for Time to Break Silence, you know, silence is betrayal, blase, blah. That's a hell of a speech. And it creates the political conditions for broad people's movement against the war and against it as a colonial war.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So the evolution of a movement, and it was such a fierce movement that Johnson, who was the president, had to say he was not going to run in '68.
I see.
His position was so at odds with the people. And then Nixon becomes president, and tries to escalate the war, which only increased domestic opposition. See, and that's one thing we have to take into account. Winning an election does not mean winning the people. So you can get elected, just like Biden has gotten elected, but he ain't won the people. He got elected and then got the lowest polling numbers of any president they've ever kept polls on.
I mean, it's a question even if he got elected.
Well, true that. I won't even raise that yet, but that's becoming even a bigger question. When we discuss Twitter, the Twitter files, maybe we'll get to that. Oh, yeah. Huh? The Twitter files, I'll tell you that. Twitter. Oh. Oh, go ahead, Shanti.
I wanted to talk a little bit about, like, I was just thinking about Du Bois and his idea about the American Revolution. And I just think that his viewing of the world is just so broad and comprehensive that Gerald Horn cannot think on his level, on any state. And
So can I just,
of course, yeah.
this is a very, very important point. You know, from a social scientific standpoint, what is the level of complexity that one is prepared to engage, to understand something, and to discover the truth? You see, just a small, I'm sorry to cut you off, Shanti. You know, academic careers, huge academic careers, are based upon keeping things as simplistic and uncomplicated as possible. But I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, and that's the entire point of deconstruction, right? Like, there's an entire academic venture related to just deconstructing large complex components into simpler ones for people to not think as much.
Or cohesively.
Yeah. It's not cohesive. It's not understood in a world context. You just simplify it so that you can understand it in your little community and what that applies to. But that sort of disconnects you from the world. And yeah, so going back to
this is very important.
and going back to what I was thinking about is we have two clear sort of ideas, which is the British wanted to abolish slavery and the Americans wanted to uphold it. And this is something that really surprised me when I read World in Africa for the first time. And I was like, I had no idea about the world at that point. But when I read World in Africa, Du Bois points out that the reason why the British tried to abolish slavery is because it became unprofitable. The reason why they tried to abolish slavery is because they realized that transporting slaves across the Atlantic was unprofitable, and they would much rather have the labor done where the slaves are, just transport the finished goods or raw goods to and from there, and depend on indentured labor in other countries. That's why the British wanted to abolish slavery, and that's
Or the slave trade.
the slave trade. The slave trade.
Wait, can you repeat that?
So in World in Africa, during the 1800s, when Du Bois mentioned that the slave trade was sort of a competition between the Portuguese and the French and all of these people who are trying to control different parts of Africa and South and Asia.
Right.
And the reason why the British said, now we got to put, like, after becoming the world historic propagator of the slave trade, they beat everybody.
Yeah.
The Dutch, the French, they beat everybody, got to the top, and then they were like, all right, now we got to, now the it is becoming unprofitable to remain in this business of the slave trade. So now we have to abolish it so that no one profits from it, because we have found a better way in forming this, getting goods from India back to Britain, then selling it and then bringing this getting this the goods to where the labor is, making the finished goods, selling them back to the global south and the third world. That was more profitable. It was just the numbers that made them abolish slavery. So how can you call this a counter-revolution?
No, come on. No, I'm sorry. Forgive me. I'm sorry, Chachi.
No. It's ridiculous when you really consider the reasons why slavery was trying to be abolished by the British, and then there's no real morality in this argument. And I think that the points that Du Bois makes in Black Reconstruction takes into account all of this knowledge that he has, and all of the knowledge that Gerald Horn does not have gives rise to an argument like that.
No, I think it's very true what you're saying. And to me, because India became the crown jewel in the British Empire, for 150 years or more. And so why transport Africans to the Western world when you can enslave Indians in India?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And of course, this is why the Du Boisian thing of the slave as a enslaved proletariat, this is very, very important. So, I mean, you can achieve similar outcomes under different form. The same thing. I agree with that. And we have not studied the evolving labor processes in early capitalist development. How similar was forced labor in India to enslaved labor in the United States or Jamaica?
Even after 1776, Britain still sent raw goods to America for the enslaved labor in America to make into finished goods to transport back. It's not like they stopped.
Well, actually, it was cotton and tobacco and rice, other products of slave labor that was transported to London, to Britain, and the finished product to India. And that's why Gandhi threw a monkey wrench in that supply chain. It was very, very important, but it was his recognition of disrupting the supply chain and the global labor process. You know what I'm saying? And it was not unlike what Du Bois perceived as a general strike, 500,000 of the enslaved workers putting down their tools, walking away. Now, 500,000 is a small percentage of 4 million, but it was significant enough at the time that it happens to affect or to have an impact upon the outcome of the war, because the South, whose free population was half of the North. In other words, there were altogether, let us say, 9 million people in the South, 5 million white, 4 million blacks. But only 5 million were, quote, free and eligible to fight. But they relied upon, and I think in the North there were about 10 million white people, so double the size. But the South was relying upon Britain still buying cotton.
Yeah.
And so Britain was locked into the political economy of the cotton trade. That's why they said cotton was king. Cotton was, in that period, what oil is today. Actually, the British pound, in a lot of ways, became the world currency because of the cotton trade. So I just, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, another big part of this equation of why Britain, I would say, quote unquote, abolished slavery, because I think that term alone is
the slave trade.
The slave trade, is in part due to the fact that the slaves in a lot of these colonies revolted, and it became impossible to sustain through the fact that the slaves wouldn't allow themselves to be treated in this system in the way that it was. And of course, in America, they had enough poor white, population in order to facilitate control of that black population. I see like slavery. How Du Bois talks about how the Civil War, basically, the black slave was able to win his freedom only then to, after Black Reconstruction and after this reaction, be pushed back into a vaster sort of a development of slavery in much the way we see, I think, the American Revolution and these ideas of individual freedom kind of flourish and develop around the world. What I would say how the Bolsheviks took it and added something to it and established a new idea of what does freedom honestly mean when we, the discussion of freedom doesn't end with democracy. It begins with democracy. Is another thing Du Bois talks about in Black Reconstruction. And similarly with slavery, what are we even talking about when we're talking about slavery? I mean, there are all different kinds of ways people can be oppressed and subjugated, and these things can develop over time. And that's kind of what we've seen around the world, is these two different ideas develop kind of simultaneously. And also, I mean, just this idea of not seeing the potential or overlooking the potential of the agency of working people. I mean, this is, again, part of the reason the British had to abandon this particular style of slavery is because the people wouldn't allow it. In a similar way, the chattel slavery in America, the slaves wouldn't allow it anymore. They walked off. And I would even say that's how World War I ended. The mass of peasants and oppressed people in Russia, which became the Bolshevik, the base of the Bolshevik support, were people that Europeans completely overlooked. I mean, that's part of the reason the Germans sent Lenin to Russia, because they thought, they'll just mess up things, but they won't be able to control the state, Overlooking these populations is ultimately what is seemingly the downfall of the circumstances in which these particular structures are to hold power. I'm sorry.
Do you mind if I interrupt you just to underline a point you're making? See, in a lot of ways, in ways that are not obvious to a lot of people, in the Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx and Frederick Engels assert that that all previous history is a history of the class conflict. But when they get to the anti-slavery struggle, it is not an instance of the history of the class conflict. I just wanted to say that. But in Du Bois, it is. It is. But that insight, we can get to Karl Marx, Frederick Engels, and that be repeated. But yet, as they repeat it, they do not see what you saw, what Du Bois calls a general strike. What he was, and this, I'm appreciative of Danny for bringing this to our attention, that that what Du Bois is talking about is the capacity of workers under enslaved conditions to mobilize and act against their exploiters. Which meant that the logic of the anti-slavery struggle by the slaves could lead to a dictatorship of the proletariat and socialism. It was on the table for Du Bois and Black Reconstruction. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, I mean, it's essentially what I was trying to get at. And like, I don't know, I think of something that I heard Diane Nash talk about, which is basically, the reason that we had segregation in public transportation and other places was because Black people in this country, to some degree, accepted the terms and would go to the back of the bus and would take this degradation. And as soon as they removed that support, even being a minority, the moment they removed that support, the apparatus around them had to find a different way to continue, because that just wasn't going to be allowed. And so just the importance of understanding how much of an impact we can make when we decide as a group of people that this is no longer the way we're going to continue to tolerate society. And also another interesting point is that the boys makes is that, slavery had existed for millennia before chattel slavery had developed in America. And throughout the world where slaves revolted and were able to gain power, in many cases, they decided to have a slavery system of their own. And curiously, in America, it was sort of a singular moment where Black people in mass no longer, once winning their freedom in a certain way, didn't have an interest of then becoming this oppressive class. Now, part of that is because they were, as a group, outlawed from getting into those positions, and perhaps there's other historical factors there. But this, I think, in a lot of ways, the ideas behind individual liberty and this kind of thing had such an impact in such a large way that, like, it created this environment for qualitative change and understanding that relationship. And similarly, I see how things are developing in the world today with what we understand is this multipolar age, where prior to this moment, we had colonial powers vying for new ways to subjugate and sort of win their own independence at the expense of the sovereignty of others, where now we see China, we see Russia, we see India, we see all these other parts of the world that are much more interested in having just a peaceful coexistence and dialogue, and sort of removing this structure that is predicated upon oppressing other people. It's really, it seems like another qualitative change in the consciousness of the vast majority of people. And I think in large part because these people come from places where they understand what that oppression really means.
Can I just say one thing? On the question of chattel slavery as opposed to classical slavery.
Sure. Yeah.
See, that chattel thing is a whole different.
Very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chattel meaning property.
Yeah.
Now, and then even there you have a legal definition of I own you, not just your labor power, but I own you. Now, because let's take the American Revolution. Labor under conditions of bourgeois rule, bourgeois legality, is different than labor under feudal rule. However, the unresolved question was labor with no rights. And that's why the question of the ending of slavery, by whatever means, was a question of the completion, and I put quotes here, of the bourgeois revolution.
Yeah.
But, and this is where I agree with you, Ed, but before this could fully be completed, it was cut short, and the enslaved proletariat was pushed back. See, now the idea of land, and that was a bourgeois freedom, a bourgeois idea, land and labor. Give me land, I'll mix it with my labor. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So that's 40 acres and a mule and yada, 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 never to be realized, and pushed back very close to something that looks like slavery again. But I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah. No, that's it.
And so we face, and this is why I think today this, like you said, everything is a part of a long historical process. We are both to complete the bourgeois revolution of 1776. We have to move to another stage of history. And this is what makes Horn it's so grotesque. And, it's like, this person that got a beef, rather than a person who wants to discover truth in order to help discover a path forward. It's like I got a beef with the historical profession. But it's not, or the myth that America, yada, yada. Well, who believes that? Okay, you can get like on Fox News, on certain of these places, but serious thinkers do not accept a utopian explanation of the American Revolution. It was a bourgeois revolution, rife with contradictions, class contradictions, race contradictions, all along everything. And who expected the first anti-colonial bourgeois revolution to resolve all? I mean, first of all, they didn't have the experience or knowledge. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to make a big thing, but how do we go forward without understanding the tasks of this moment in relationship to the unfulfilled tasks of earlier moments? You can't. And for Horn, there is no way forward. It's a dark night. And I wouldn't want to be him, because I can't, that's not my personality. How do you live like that? I'd like to see his graduate students. What do they look like? It's like, it's like eating out of a garbage can. Excuse me. It's another, I would just say that. So let me just say, unless there's something else to say about we have some comments?
Oh, yeah, but did you had your hand up?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Sorry, no, I was like focused on listening to you. I lost my point. I was going to talk about, after Emil's point, Angela Davis's essay on the Black woman's role in
the
slavery.
community of slaves, which I think is one of her best writings.
Yeah, Brandon had sent it to me like a few weeks ago, and I had just got the chance to read it this week. But when you were talking about the difference of like feudalism and peasantry or slavery outside of chattel slavery, she was talking about how the biggest difference too, just like you named of the property aspect, was in chattel slavery, like you are taking a person literally out of their home, out of everything they know, their people, their language, their culture. So you're placing them in this foreign place where not only are they your property or worker, but they don't have any other thing to anchor them, to tie them to. And she was talking about how
that's a very important point.
Right. And then she talked about too how Black people and their resistance of slavery, like Emil was talking about, was so powerful because she brought up the Maroons, and then the woman's role in that was they didn't have that like twist today of how we focus so much on gender politics, like women live such a different life than women. Like Black women were never afforded that because they were in the fields with men. Then they had to go into the white people's homes and nurse their children, and then they had to go into their living quarters and give birth to their child, who was then ripped away from them, couldn't even really be their child. And then she just talked a lot about that dynamic and how Black women were molded and shaped to be like so much out of that femininity like circle that white women were trying to curate them.
She's making that point of gender, the social construction of gender in the community of slaves.
Exactly.
And
they talked down, talked down a lot. They really minimized the role of like Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman too. Because she said that what we found, or what she was finding in the text, is because she wrote this, I believe she was like imprisoned at the time.
I think so. In the late
Yeah, because in the
60s,
beginning, the
yeah.
introduction, she was like, I'm writing this like from a
Mhm,
prison cell.
mhm,
But
mhm.
she's talking about how a lot of textbooks would even minimize the roles of the Black woman just to make it seem as though like you can't encourage your people. It's like even though we're told, oh, Harriet Tubman had this many successful trips, it's like it was much more than what we're told. But that was important to me, just like that first grounding point of the difference of chattel slavery, what Europeans introduced versus what was already being practiced.
And as Du Bois said, rape was not illegal.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Because that was another point too. Because if it's your property, it's your object of whatever you want to do to it. And it's like, then she spoke again about that line between white and Black woman, how the white man's sexual desire was too beast-like to unleash on a white woman. So they had to go into the slave quarters and take a Black woman and just abuse them that way. Because they seen what they were doing, what they desired as demonic. And they're like, I can't put that on my people, someone that I love. Like that origin of that is so deep. And it goes in today too, into like music and how we talk about all the time, how rap has come into this really just very anti-Black exploitative genre of now it's like we're right, and the objectification that we do that is so harmful. It's like it's seen as powerful because if a woman, or like in rap, if a Black woman is talking about her body in an explicit way, it's empowering because it's me. I'm talking about my body, but it's like that wasn't really yours. Like, and when I was reading that, I was like really thinking how everything that we think is our own empowerment, it really isn't. It's just the twist of what we've had to go through, what we've had to endure. To me, it's a coping mechanism.
You says, I didn't quite understand.
I'm sorry, I rambled a little
more
bit,
time.
but when I was reading that part about Black women in slavery being sexually abused by their white master, I was connecting it to how it's even risen today in Black female rap, in the exploitation, in the genre. Like, if you want to be a Black female rapper and you want to have mainstream success, you have to exploit yourself. You have to like sexually objectify yourself. But now, because it's not a Black man doing it, it's seen as power. It's like, oh, this is empowering. But in a way, you could argue it's really not, because you're still making yourself this object that you weren't, like, you couldn't choose that in the beginning. You know what I mean? Like, this is just, I feel like it's a psychological coping mechanism of what we've gone through. It's like, this is what somebody did to me, and now I'm going to do it to myself. And because I'm profiting off of it, I'm winning. But it's like, you're not. It's even worse, because now you have the choice to give yourself dignity and integrity, and you're choosing to tear yourself down in front of an audience. But
see, that's like, it's a fake freedom. And you know, you get people who were denied from the beginning of bourgeois revolutions, bourgeois freedoms, that is to be legally equal, to have a certain process, legal process, if you're harmed, if you're raped or whatever. And then now you say in the 21st century that I define bourgeois freedom as my being able to demean myself publicly, even to demean myself using racist, sexist tropes. And because I'm using it, that means they're not racist or sexist anymore. If you were doing it, then it would be racist and sexist. But because I'm doing it, it's not.
It's kind of like it gets into the deference politics of when whoever is the minority of the conversation, if they're pointed to and whatever they say, that's Bible now. So it's like,
say that again. Whatever
they say, that's taken as the truth. And
that's right. That's well. See, isn't that interesting? It's now my truth and your truth. So, you know, go ahead. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt.
No, I just when you reinterpreted it your way, that's what I thought about, because I think that's what a lot of mainstream media and political messages are now. It's like, we're gonna, like you said before, talking about how like the Black girl magic thing, like when they put people on that pedestal, it makes it look as though they are empowered or they're giving substance to a matter of struggle,
Or
but
let
it's
us
really
say
not.
a new substance.
Mhm.
See,
A
and
new
this is okay.
substance.
Oh, go ahead. I don't want to cut you
No,
off.
you go
But
ahead.
I think this
Go
is, I'm so glad you brought this up because, like you say, we are talking, and this is where Horn's thesis and the details of the wrongness of the thesis this reviewer brings out. I haven't finished it, but he seems to have just shown how it's corrupted scholarship.
Yeah.
It's a sad thing for me to see Horn go into this thing. But the question is, and this has always been for radical thinkers, for mainstream historians, and so on. You see, they argue that the Declaration of Independence and the US Constitution and the Bill of Rights, actually, the first 10 amendments,
Mhm.
constitutes the highest achievement to that point, and some would argue even today, of bourgeois freedoms.
Right.
By bourgeois freedoms, we mean freedoms to an individual, to individuals,
Mhm.
based upon a class we call bourgeoisie or capitalist, and the ideas that they brought in this revolution. In other words, that all individuals are equal before the law. The idea of the law is very important. This is a great achievement of really the American bourgeois revolution. And it becomes a model for other struggles.
Yeah.
A legal system that asserts the equality of all individuals. But it did not implement that, and it took decades and more than a century to begin to fulfill it, and still hasn't. So then you get to this current period where we're going to take things into our own hands, quote unquote. So I'm going to define my freedom.
Right.
Freedom to me is as you described it. I can present myself in, let me just take rap. I'll take not female rap, but rap, main rap.
Mhm.
I will call myself the N-word. I will call my sister the B-word. I will, but it's not racist or sexist because I'm doing it and I'm, quote, black.
Yeah.
But it's only that you're channeling racist stereotypes.
I wanted to just give grace too for the people who do it, because I feel like a lot of times when you're critiquing something, it's easy for other people to think that you don't think much of those people in terms of humanity. But I think that the reason we have gone down that road as Black people in entertainment is because we haven't had any other broader scope of what to do. And I think the only difference that they knew or that they know of is, well, I don't want them to tell me who I am. I want to tell me who I am. But at the same time, the only books or the only, I guess, teachings of who I am come from them.
This
It
is
comes from the
interesting.
elite.
So you're asserting that there was a vacuum
Yeah.
of meaning, of ideas, and this filled the vacuum.
Yeah.
This is a very interesting question. So let me just ask one question. Could it be, and I'm not trying to be a conspiratorial theorist.
Right.
Underline that.
No. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I
I don't want to, but could it be the very people that created the vacuum
Hello.
then filled it?
Hello.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Basically.
That's the thing. At the end of the day,
Yeah, that's true.
the rappers and producers and all that, they're working for somebody. They're not.
Well, somebody has power.
Right.
Yeah.
It
That's
does-
like you
it is-
always say. It's not a Black invention. It's actually
It isn't.
it's a white invention.
But the fact that it was popularized is part of the problem, more than a solution.
Right.
Yeah.
But then how do we find the grace out of that? Because
You say the grace?
you like, how do we find the grace for the people who are
That's
within that vacuum? Because I think it's important to give human grace like all the time, just as a human being. And I'm not saying grace as in you just pat that person on the head when they're doing wrong, but oh, it's okay. It's like, no, you understand that people have the ability to change. You could change your mind, and that's why we come here. Like, that's why we learn what we do about Du Bois and Baldwin and Lenin and Marxism, because we were all taught under the same ideologies of white America, established through literature that comes from Europe and Britain. So just like me and you were talking about Marcus Garvey, when I told you I grew up and that's somebody that was idolized in my household, just at least on the surface level, because of him being Jamaican and his Pan-Africanness. It wasn't so much his actual politics that I grew up on, it was the cultural symbolism of somebody having freedom and trying to bring unity to Black people. And I think that's what we hold on to as a main population, is the symbolism and not the actual
And the mythology,
Yeah.
the mythology of Garvey,
Yeah.
which actually, if I might just say this,
No,
and I don't mean to disrespect the Jamaican people
No, it's
for whom Garvey is a hero,
Mhm.
but he is not the same hero or symbol here in the
Right.
United States that he may be in Jamaica,
Right.
because the struggle in Jamaica and the struggle here are not the same struggle.
Mhm.
And you can't, that, well, by the way, Gerald has become a neo-Garveyite. That's his position.
Oh.
I'll explain it to you.
Yeah.
But I'll show you where he says, but let me just make this quick point. The historical specificities of the American struggle,
Right.
for all kinds of reasons on multiple levels, has to be respected. And hence, the struggle of Black people would not be in the United States, ain't gonna be the same as in Trinidad or Jamaica or Cuba or Venezuela. It's not going to be, one, because this is the major capitalist country, the richest country, the most powerful military country, blase in the world. And so, I just want to say, so for example, you have people, I know Denise will criticize or raise questions with Purba about, well, y'all don't have Black women. I'm into the Black woman. And I mean, they say that to her, but come on, man.
In terms of what?
That's a very interesting question. In terms of, I don't want to come to anything the free school does because I'm into Black women.
But what do you mean by that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'm trying to understand.
Yeah. It's so vague. I mean, what are you saying? Or
That's the virtue signaling, though, that I was talking about. It's the symbolism. It's that difference politics of, if the face of a message matches what that person's ideal is in their head, they don't even have to hear it. They just have to look at it and say, that makes sense, and that's what I stand by.
Yeah, I'm with that. But then, it's a bad faith kind of positioning. Bad faith meaning hypocritical.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you ain't involved in nothing.
No, it's shallow.
It is shallow.
So and these are grown people, grown ass women and men.
Shallow.
Yeah. So I don't blame. But go ahead,
No,
Sarah.
I mean,
Let me just go to the back.
For Sade's question about giving grace, like at the end of the day, I can't tell anybody what to do, how to live their life. Like people will find a way to do that. But if like you call yourself and you mean to yourself like you are like a nigger, like you believe yourself as that, and you and if you see all the violence that's going on in your own communities and things, like, do you really think that it's positive, or do you really think that the contribution that you want to make artistically, say if you're a rapper or whatever, is a positive one, or is there a justification for that? And I only mention that because it's easy. It's like it's back to what Doc was saying earlier. Like sometimes you just have to grow up and take responsibility for what is actually going on outside, which is kind of a question though, because it's very difficult outside.
That's what I mean.
I
Because they're
know
in
it's,
that vacuum, so it's like, how do they see
I
outside of
know
that?
it's what you mean, but then it's like, but this is actually what's going on. It still comes to the question of, do you want it to continue? Or is this something that could be stopped? Or do you really believe that we could just actually commit suicide and it's better to die? And that's part of the, point that Doc was saying earlier about the music.
Yeah.
In times where people turn their backs on you, do you commit suicide or do you stand?
Right.
And so part of the problem is that, the West wants to keep Black people in a corner in a vacuum without any hope, without any meaning, without any identity, without any history or time. And so when people are believing or succumb to that, they also die a spiritual death. And what also happens is that, you can't do anything in that moment. Doesn't mean that person isn't a human being, or that person isn't trying. Like I said last week, I do believe everybody's trying. I do believe in the possibilities and potentials of anybody. But I just know that when it comes to this specific moment in crisis and how the West desperately needs young people, poor people who are all isolated in different parts of the country, young people without any vision, no education. They need them to also just be like robots and not say anything. So for the West to continue to make profit, for the West to continue to make wars abroad, everything. It's a moment where like just saying something a little bit different actually matters a whole lot more. And to be honest with you, anybody at this time, in my opinion, even if they do like rap, can also kind of see the problems that it has made and is making to their own moral well-being consciousness and to the people around them. They're not going to call their moms like bitches and hoes now.
Could you?
I really believe that.
I mean, extend,
I
you
really-
say
I really
even the
believe
person
that.
who believes, who
Like,
is
what
a
is the-
fan or hip hop head, feels a moral crisis.
I think it's really deep right now,
Yeah.
just because everything is so bad.
Yeah.
And it's just like you can't be on your phone or watch the news with seeing how bad the city is in the neighborhoods and things like that. So I think this is the time to be able to be confident in what it is. For me personally, what it is that I am. I would say that I'm a political person. I know that, I strive to give to other people and also learn as much as I can. And I know that also presents a possibility for everybody around me. So I think that that's more important than just giving grace, unfortunate as that might kind of be in my relationship.
I feel like it's not a this or that though. Because when I say like to inject like human grace, it's not to say, oh, we just need to focus on giving grace to people and trying to meet them where they're at. I'm saying like multiple things can be true at once because there's nothing you said that I disagree with. I feel like it's just a matter that from what I see, because I can only really explain my perspective, is in many conversations and in many ideological, political debates, there's no room for that. Like it seems that we're either so passionate about the ideals that we believe that we just want that person to get it and get it clear, but then neither of us are doing the beeline work of trying to understand, well, where did your ideas come from?
I'm not saying that it's like I'm not, see, for me, because as a person, I'm not telling anybody what to do. Like I said, I'm not trying to tell people what to do. I'm not also ever really putting myself in a position where I can't learn from somebody. Because I'm just not that type of person. But I get what you're saying completely. Because I guess that's like the problem in the dynamic like what is right, you know, what is the truth of the matter. But that's why I kind of steer away from dogma then, instead of like going to the moral principle of the matter.
Right.
That's what I care about more so. But
Yeah, the conversation and bringing up the word grace made me also think about Kanye, because it's exactly once he representing like this generation, like I don't know, there's something about where when you were talking about grace, I was like, isn't it interesting that it's exactly when Kanye starts speaking up and standing up and saying things explicitly, like saying like actually it's anti-Semitic for rappers, including myself, like who in the like where I made mistakes, where he said like, isn't it anti-Semitic for rappers to call like our women bees and hoes? He's like,
Yeah.
once he starts saying that, that's when he gets no grace.
That's exactly what I
which is-
mean.
No, it's
That's
exactly
what-
when he
yeah.
said that he will not get grace. Like, and I feel like that's the interesting thing, or like that's the hypocrisy where it's like you can't give all these rappers saying like bees and hoes grace, and then when Kanye starts, when Kanye starts
Exactly.
like him representing a whole generation of young men who have been given a white invention and thought that like, oh, okay, maybe this is what I should take up, that he's now like he's not given grace. It shows that there's something not just human involved. There's something like there's people, external. There's people,
And giving those other rappers to grace, that's not grace. That's just like selectivism.
Right.
That's when you know that they're pushing. They're pushing a message that you know is problematic. You're gonna let them keep
for the
talking.
ruling class.
Right. And that's a perfect example, Em, about Kanye West and the grace that he's not getting at all from anyone. Because I understand you're underscoring too, like you don't want to tell people what to do. That's not what I'm trying to get at all. Like I understand no one at this table like wants to, well, I don't know, maybe y'all are controlling. I don't think anyone at the table wants to tell people what to do and what to think. That literally goes against preschool. Like
all the time.
But yeah, that's what I'm getting at, is when somebody has this, I guess, mask painted on them that everything and anything that they do and say and think is wrong, and they get no grace. Meaning, like I was saying to Doc, like when we don't give people that chance to change or to have an opinion of value and integrity, then your brain is already automatically saying no to them, which means you're saying no to yourself. You're saying no, like you don't want to learn, you don't want to grow, and you don't want to give people a chance.
Yeah.
Oh, can I bring in some comments?
Oh yeah, please.
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, Brandon says he's loving this conversation, the one that we just had that like started with what you're saying, Sade, and then like Philip Logan has. I'm gonna work backwards, by the way. Philip Logan has something interesting to add. Where he said the emphasis. Okay, well I'll start with his first comment, and this is in response to your original point, Sade. He says that reminds me of when Dave Chappelle, the comedian, became self-conscious about some of the comedic routines he and Neil Brennan were writing for Chappelle's Show back in the 2000s. Yeah. And he says, the emphasis on entertainment, which includes sports, represents a retreat of Black uplift into culture and radical individualism. The Black bourgeoisie, by and large, do not have a program for Black people other than trying to negotiate better terms with sympathetic white liberals. Their unwillingness to protect Black revolutionaries has led to a political and social situation where there is a lot of cultural protection around entertainers and athletes because they represent a progress of a kind that can be achieved within the realms of American bourgeois society, which is a white-dominated society. That was interesting. And then going back into, and this is going back to what you were saying, Doc, about bourgeois freedom, like fake freedom. Pastor Keith says, bourgeois freedom is fake freedom. Great dialogue. And Danny adds in, bourgeois freedom is based on labor. It is not, quote, individual because property presupposes society. Property is not possession but a right, and therefore presupposes society. The, quote unquote, inalienable right that is in the Constitution means labor. One cannot voluntarily sell themselves into slavery from a bourgeois standpoint because that would contradict the very right to sell, which presupposes property. It only became self-evident in bourgeois society. This is why previous slave revolts, aka pre-bourgeois, did not lead to the overcoming of slavery. Labor is the basis of property in bourgeois society. Bourgeois means urban, burgs, or in New York, the boroughs. Property used to be based on conquest and lineage prior to bourgeois society. Labor used to be looked down upon as profane. In traditional society, the very invention of sports is linked to the past ruling class's hatred of labor and affirmation of war. Sports as imitating competition and conflict. Bourgeois, it is not capitalist, which is an expression of the self-contradiction of labor. Capital is dead, past labor dominating the present. This is why the Industrial Revolution is happening after the foundation of bourgeois society is so important. It is why Du Bois says that slavery changes from the patriarchal character as it was for Washington to become an open stock exchange. And then he references, this is chapter 3 of Black Reconstruction.
It's the last point.
Chapter
It is why Du Bois says that slavery changes from the patriarchal character as it was for Washington to become an open stock exchange. Chapter 3 of Black Reconstruction. Okay, there's a lot more comments. I'm moving backwards. And this is because I think, it's Christmas Eve. There's no better place to be. There's
holiday
yeah,
special.
people, where else are
It is a
what else are
holiday.
people supposed to do? Be with their families.
Well,
You
we
can do
are with
both.
our family, huh?
Yeah.
Well, we are, but I'm just saying, I'm pretty sure everyone watching comments
Okay.
because they're stuck with their
Oh,
families. They'd rather be here.
Yeah.
No offense, Mom.
Oh.
So,
We heard what Sly Stone said, right?
What?
We are family.
Oh, yeah.
No. That's the
We.
But Sister Sledge.
That's Sister Sledge.
That's a really good song.
I got all my
Yeah, that'll
sisters
be the
and me.
outro.
Yes,
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, okay.
Okay, now, because that was the most relevant to that conversation, so now I'll start from the beginning and move down. Listen, I'm creating a narrative.
Oh, you got
So,
Facebook.
okay, now I'll go to the beginning. So this is when everyone at the beginning, they popped in just on time.
Yeah.
Philip Logan said, "Happy holidays, comrades."
Yeah.
Neha says, "Happy holidays and Merry Christmas." Dusty Hines says, "Happy holidays." Montero tells it how it is. Dusty.
Oh, Dusty Hines.
Hello to all from
Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Oh, yeah.
Ram Mohan Rai from India says, "Merry Christmas, comrades."
Namaste, Ramon. We love you.
Kathy says, Kathy's in California. She says, "Happy holidays. So great to be with you all this morning, and I'm looking forward to the discussion."
Miss you, Kathy.
Shambarta says, "Merry Christmas, everyone. I'm missing you all."
Miss you.
Pastor Keith says, "Good morning, Doc and Free School comrades. Big ups."
Hey.
Stay warm. He says, "Stay warm. You guys are hardcore." Long live the proletariat. Virginia Cott says, "I met a 17-year-old Marxist Leninist. When I asked him where he had learned theory, he said TikTok."
Oh.
Social media is a double-edged sword.
It
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
yeah. You gotta find the difference.
Yeah. So Wayne Curtis says peace with a heart symbol. Virginia Cott says, "Good morning, everyone. I can't think of a better way to spend the morning before Christmas than to listen to Tony in a preschool."
Right.
And she said, Lenin refused to compromise.
Me
Oh,
too.
does she?
Veronica
I'm
says,
not gonna call you.
"Good morning, all."
Who's that?
Veronica Ancrum says, "Good morning."
Buenos dias.
I remember. So, and she basically, everyone I think is happy that we're having preschool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Pastor Keith says, "Great point, Doc." And that was when you said winning an election doesn't mean winning the people.
Facts.
And that was the end of comments for now.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah, that's
more
so
people are commenting than normally.
I know.
And the reason we're having free schools because of Emily.
What?
Yeah, we were texting back and forth. We shouldn't have it.
That's not
Everybody.
I would have been here anyway.
Yeah.
So
But I'm just saying, well,
You said
thank
it's
Emily.
perfect.
Don't thank me, Emily.
I literally thought just let me be with everything.
No, I said I'll do whatever you want to do.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did.
Okay, well.
well, none of y'all talked to me because I was gonna be here.
Yeah, no,
so.
that was a consideration.
No, I'm happy to be here.
Dang.
I just said Rita's gonna be here. That's all.
Yeah, that's why
Seraphina,
I decided we should be.
What would we do, Doc, on a Saturday
Yeah.
if you're in town?
What would we be doing?
Wait, are
But
we
I'm-
reading Black Reconstruction today?
Oh, yeah, what are we doing?
No, I
That's
don't
the
think
Twitter
we do.
files.
The Twitter
I
file.
thought we were reflecting on 2022.
Yeah, we're gonna,
It's-
and yeah,
it's-
and especially
Wait, what's the
the.
Twitter file?
Or maybe we
Can
should
you
say 2022 for next week.
Next
The New Year's
week,
Eve.
Next
Could
week
we
is
say a
the
few
New
things
Year's.
about the
let's
10th
say-
oh, yeah,
anniversary?
yeah.
Do you mind if we
Wait,
just
no,
sit?
yeah,
in-
go.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just asking. I was gonna tell her what the Twitter files are.
Please
about.
don't.
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
we
Twitter
need to get to
file.
both.
But you were
Okay.
gonna say something?
I was. No. I think about the rap thing. No, I was enjoying the conversation, but I think what I was going to say came up in that it reminded me of the question you pose a lot of the times, is that how did the music of Aretha and Nina Simone and Ray Charles and Marvin Gaye and all of that tradition, how did it morph into the rap and hip hop thing? And then what Shade said, something about how the white the white conception of Black women was. That's what you see in rap that day. I think it reminded me that this is how one can answer your question, is
Yeah.
that it's clear it's not the black idea of Black
No.
women, it's the white idea of Black
And that's
women.
what the experience, our experience collectively as the free
Yeah.
school in our, I just have to call them wonderfully edifying family relationships with the Church of the Overcome, with the Church of the Crucifixion, with the Nation of Islam. I mean, you see no evidence of that thinking among these mass organizations.
No.
It's the very opposite. So the question becomes, it's not even a matter of, is hip hop, quote, a brilliant synthesis? I'll leave that to musicologists. But no one can deny the moral, the change of the moral foundations from what was to this.
Yeah.
And that's where the question of, I'm sorry.
Because that reminded me last week when we were talking about how the assassinations of JFK and so on
Right.
started a period of the state not only being counter-revolutionary but fascist. And the same thing comes with the music. The music also changed drastically through that period. Because I agree with that point that you three are making in general, that if the rappers or the popular music of today actually agrees with authoritarianism, fascism, anything that works against the people in a humanistic way, then yes, it sells. So
No, I think it's a very important point. I would just differ. See, on this timeline, if you take Kennedy's assassination in '63,
okay.
as his nephew Robert Kennedy says, my uncle was killed by the CIA and it constituted a coup d'etat. I would have to agree with him. But it didn't mean that that state power was completely
I wouldn't
consolidated.
say that either.
No,
That's
but
not
I'm
exactly
saying
what I'm
because the struggle but they had, I don't know how to put it, because they had to go from a social contract with the American people. That's what the New Deal represented, a social contract, where if there's unemployment, the government will, the government has a responsibility to provide for those who are unemployed. That's a social contract. Johnson's civil rights and anti-poverty was the sense of a social contract with the people. Well, by the time of Reagan's election, it was said that the government had no responsibility in a social contractual way, that it was the individual, and all the government was responsible for was creating conditions for individuals to be successful. You see what I'm saying? And this is the question you were asking me about John Maynard Keynes and economic policy and theory. But see, it was fake because at the very time that a movement claiming to empower individuals and get the government out of their lives was taking off, and that's with Ronald Reagan's election in 1980. At the same time, you have the consolidation of the state as a more repressive instrument, rather than a supposed democratic instrument. This was huge, and you could almost see it with the end of the Soviet Union. There are no more constraints, no more it's over. And this is what I think we're seeing in this new concept of freedom, extreme freedom, freedom that does not have any boundaries, and it's quote unquote, because that's not freedom.
Right.
Yeah. And this idea that, I as a Black person, I can call my girlfriend and myself the N word, the B word, any other word, and this is just me expressing my truth. Well, I won't go in, I don't, but you see but it does follow from a kind of neoliberal end of society, because it is an attack upon society. Once that language becomes institutionalized, you are attacking the rights of people to live together socially. And it is that type of attack. Suppose I don't want my daughters or granddaughters seeing a performance on a video of a Black woman with breast implants, butt implants, and twerking. That's a grotesque thing to look at now. The sexual, and thus the sexualization of children. This is horrible. This is not society. This is anti-society. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, and then this also reminds me of the conversation which was very interesting we were having about how is it that you give grace to people who in some ways are misled into thinking that this is empowering.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of the Nation of Islam and how they spoke to people in a dangerous situation, people who were on their way to prison, people who were in the grips of addiction, people who were straying from the right path. And I think the way that they had, and this is true for all revolutionary leaders, I think Gandhi, King, like tough love, I mean, the way to give grace is by showing them the potential of what people actually can do and can achieve if they were to have perspective.
Oh yeah. Hence elevating the capacity of people to fight, to struggle for freedom.
Right. And I also feel like this question of this question of grace, first, I think people who see themselves in the vanguard of a movement versus people who don't see them in the vanguard of a struggle approach these differently, because the liberal perspective of giving grace is that, oh no, I have to be respectful to everybody's personal
that's what I was trying not
struggles.
to compare it to.
But somebody who consider themselves to be in the vanguard of a struggle for the forward path of American society and people, I think they would see grace as differently. They'd see it more like the Nation of Islam,
I
more
agree.
like King. Yeah.
That's a great example, actually.
Right.
I agree with that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think having the examples that we study are also, very compelling things that many people, they hear the name Paul Robeson maybe. They know maybe some small tidbits about his life that don't maybe play such a role into the psyche of what people consider successful. But when Paul Robeson says, I don't see success in terms of myself.
Right.
And when he's getting interviewed, they're like, oh, well, clearly your people have come so far. I mean, look at all the money you've got, look how much you've accomplished. And he would say things like, how dare you? How dare you use me as an example of the whole group of people that I represent? Because I was able to slip through the cracks.
Right.
Outrageous of you. And of course, is part of the reason we don't have Paul Robeson's is because this kind of belief system is, poison to the certain worldview that we're given now. So I think we have there's such a resonance in the history of this country of figures like him that I think unfortunately have been blacked out of the social consciousness of people. But just in the way you frame these questions, like how do we give grace, like we're really starting from a position of love, of loving one another, and that's what's driving us. And too much of what I think we are exposed to is the lack thereof. I mean, Gerald Horn, I think, is a perfect example of this. Does he love the people that he's trying to teach? Is that really where he's coming from? Because it seems like just from the way he talks, at least a little bit that I've heard him speak, and many others. I mean, it's very violent. It's very top down. It's very much, I can't trust you. You shouldn't trust anyone else.
That's like what Tony was saying. It's like something of a revenge.
What was Tony saying?
No, I was talking about Gerald. When he said he was asking who Gerald Horn's audience is and if he loves them, and that's what you touched on. He said it doesn't sound like he wants to teach these people. It just sounds like he has a vendetta, a historical vendetta, and he's trying to unleash that through his writing, which is very childish, not adult at all.
That's very interesting. Go ahead.
So I'm not incredibly knowledgeable about Black hip hop music. I will be after I have that conversation with you. But I realized that when you were talking about these Black female rappers trying to make it on the commercial scene, and they have to sell their own bodies and they talk about their own bodies in a certain way. But I have also noticed that Black female rappers sort of, not just Black men, but also Black women are also sort of throwing abuse at the Black female. Right? And when you think about the Black woman abusing the Black woman, it's sort of, and the way that they do it from the A to Z's of expletives, I don't know why it makes me think about the white woman, because that's how modern white women talk to each other. I don't want to imitate them. But
is there imitation coming?
No.
Maybe Doug can handle that.
That's like, he's so good at it. No, I agree.
But so
I want to hear Doug.
Let him finish.
Michelle, please.
No, but it really, I'm really trying to understand, because now that I have established, so in a way, trying to process that the Black men are sort of modern imitations of past white men. What are the Black women trying to achieve through abusing their fellow women?
I'm like, why are you looking at me? I feel like intense.
Only you know the answer.
I don't, but I think that goes back to what I was trying to say before, when it was kind of like this triangulation between me, Tony, and Serafina about how they exist in a vacuum. Because from what I see is that many of the people I know that are Black, they grown up in an American public school system, right? They listen to American music, and they have had an American understanding of what it means to be Black. I came from slavery. What kind of music do I like? Rap and hip hop. So it's like, if that's
from one to the
no, seriously, and those are extremes, right?
Slavery.
No, that's literally what. I'm not even joking. I'm not trying to be like satirist or anything. Like, that's literally what some people's understanding is. That's what some people's understanding is. So I think when I said, they exist in a vacuum, because they have enough consciousness to know that they don't want someone who doesn't look like them to tell them who they are. But they haven't gone past that. They haven't gone past, okay, well, I know that these concepts and ideas are riddled in white supremacy and elitism. They just know that they don't want those ideals coming from a non-Black person. So I think that's where we are still in a lot of the music and the culture, which is sad because it's 2022. And like you said all the time, we've had Love Supreme and we've had all these,
Right.
like we've had people, but then Emily was touching on that too about how we're the only generation, well, our generation and I guess the generation before us, who hasn't gone through seeing a struggle movement and seeing people like trying to stand up against that. Because I can't name anybody right now. Like I guess when Colin Kaepernick was protesting and I was still in high school, I thought that maybe he would be a voice. But then I saw, and I'm not trying to judge anybody, I saw his girlfriend and I was like, she's from MTV Girl Code. And I saw the conversations that she was having and I was like, okay, well, if this person is tied to the person that they love and then he kind of went silent and his whole thing then became, oh, he's dating this person and then pop culture took over. That's when I'm like, okay, well, Colin Kaepernick isn't going to be this figure who I thought or who many people may have thought he was going to be. So I think to answer your question, it's just that we're so stuck in the, I guess, identity politics, like kind of merry-go-round of it. And there's not enough, I guess, elevation of like a free school. Like who said that? We were in a meeting with BOK and I think who was it? Brother Abdul said that they should have a free school in every city or something. And I do agree with him because I feel like it's literally that. It's the fact that everyone doesn't have access to realizing that this isn't the truth. And if the lie is more popular than the truth, then the lie is the truth.
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your question. I'm sorry.
Actually, wait, Shantanu, you had said that you're saying that like Black men in rap are trying to imitate white men.
Right.
Yeah. So actually, that's interesting because the one service that we went to, the one after the service that you guys went to, in Newark. Yeah, actually, because that was the meat of what Minister Abdul Haq Muhammad was saying was he was giving the whole point was he was like, let me give you a history lesson, which is important to know the situation of the Black rapper. He's talking about Black men, but he was basically saying that back in slavery, it started on the ships where the way that Europeans tricked
white captain.
Yeah, they tricked Africans to get on the ships because they were like, oh, dance for us because they
were entertainers.
Right, because they were entertainers and they liked Africans like dancing. And so the first step is to because you know these Africans like dancing, they're like, oh, come on the ships and now perform for us on the ships. And then they entrapped the Africans, and that's how they brought them over to America. But then even on the plantation, what they would do is the white slave masters, the zip coon, they would build these stages to have Black men who were more talented than others, who already had kind of like a musical, who maybe played the violin, maybe played the piano, maybe danced well, to compete against each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, basically dance and
isn't
sing
this,
for the master.
Can I interrupt you? But isn't this what I think Sade was saying satirically, although she said she wasn't, that we went from slavery, and I like rap, I like gangster rap. Right. So, I mean, what about, doesn't it seem, is hip hop and rap a music similar to, let us say, the melodies, work songs, and religious practices of the Africans? Did they get on that?
No. That's what Emily was touching on, because she was talking about how zip coding basically, brother Minister Abdul, he was saying that's where rap came from, was zip coding, because it was these Black men on the plantation that was singing about the Black women and the men on the fields in this exploitative ways, talking about them getting hit by their master and lynched and stuff.
Question. But doesn't that also I don't know, with reading Black Reconstruction, I think there's something about I'm not remembering specifically because I'm not that smart, but I know that he does talk about the you know what I'm talking about?
No,
Maybe
I
not.
actually, this is clarifying because I thought about that sermon a lot. Here's the
I
thing.
wish it
it's-
was there.
Yeah, here's the thing. Yeah, I feel like what you're pointing out is that, like, it kind of proves that rap music is it's not a black invention, it's a white invention.
It's a white.
Yeah,
invention.
because then
definitely.
because to say that to jump from like to make that historical assertion is to also negate the civil
Those-
rights
yeah, yeah.
movement and
Mhm.
you
The
know
sorrow
the,
song.
exactly,
Sorrow
the
song.
blues,
Yeah.
yeah,
Because
exactly.
the blues
yeah.
come from Africa, the traditions
Yes,
of
yes.
Africans.
Yes.
And the sorrow songs
Yes.
and things like that come from a spiritual well that isn't
Oh, thank you.
European at all.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
But like you can even listen. I mean, like, yeah. I just think
It's
that
interesting.
it's an interesting and that we can go to
Yeah.
like Mod 725 and get this information. But I still think that when we're studying Black Reconstruction, that we're doing something a little bit different, which is also like learning the history of a people, not a certain myth. But
Right.
Yeah. See, and that's very important. If you look at the history of, let us say, Black music
Mhm.
on these shores, one of the things, you had the Fifth Jubilee singers and stuff who sang. They were from Fisk and they went around the world singing to raise money.
Mhm.
But they were people whose parents, and even some of them, had been enslaved.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Well, why didn't they sing the way the rappers are singing?
Mm.
Or, this is, let me just say one thing, I think you'll resonate with it. Everything is melodic
I was just about to
and lyrical, and I think one of the things it seems to me about hip hop is a lack of melody and lyricism. I think now they could say, "Oh, it's a different kind of." Go ahead.
No, I'm just the rhythmic narratives of the people.
That's right.
That's what I
Of
was
the
saying.
disappointed
Of the
people.
disappointed people.
Mhm.
That's what I was trying to think of
Mhm.
because then that's
Where is that from?
what's it?
Souls of Black.
Okay.
It's the last chapter.
Gotcha.
But that
Called the Sorrow Song.
the sorrow songs and right in every chapter in the Souls of Black Folk, he does start with a little
Couple bars of the
couple
Sorrow
bars of the
Song.
song,
Okay.
Mhm.
and to show that tradition of the African proletariat. And I think
Right.
that
Right.
is the interesting moment, especially when we're listening to music, how it is in total variance, or it showcases an entirety of a civilization, a different civilization
Mhm.
than that of
Mhm.
the West
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
Europe
Mhm.
in particular.
Mhm.
But I do also think that
Mhm.
the question of the blues and R&B, jazz, and all these things
Mm.
come out of a certain civilization that is also not European, which makes
Yeah.
it makes this conversation interesting because to know like where a music comes from is not just solely to listen to it and see, what is this beat making me feel like? What is it making me do? How do I feel? But it's just like where, like, it's a pinpoint where it comes from. I know that like this is kind of like another kind of satirical joke or whatever that Emily was making about the band players, the difference between band players at the Black colleges and the white colleges or whatever.
Oh yeah.
But obviously that also
Yeah.
the marching bands, but that obviously showcases a different rhythm, and then
Oh,
you go
for
into,
sure.
and it goes into the question of the speech, and that goes with Paul Robeson, the sounds, the what's the right word when you use it with language, the
Tonalities.
not the tonality, but just the rhythm of the like languages and things, how he can associate
Mhm.
based
Cadence?
upon like African and this African languages that he can learn from like China, India, and see similarities
Right,
between everything
right.
like that.
No, it's no question about it. I don't think. I know what Minister Abdul Haq Muhammad is striving to do
Mm.
to recover people who are locked in something
Yeah.
to say, well, this is a part of our, tragic past. But see, I think I don't think that's a winning strategy.
Mm.
I really don't. I don't think patronizing Jay-Z
Oh,
is
God.
a winning strategy.
Please don't.
I think the winning strategy is to stand for the music that we stand with.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry. go ahead.
Just to respond to Shantanu's question though, because I think it's also interesting while reading Black Reconstruction what you can gain about white people, because he mentions in this first chapter, the Black Worker, about how John Henry knew how the revolutionary process would go if by certain chance the African proletariat was given or there was it happened in the right way, but then he was killed. And I think John Henry's life story, the way Du Bois also writes about it, is interesting too. Because when you ask, like, okay, well, if black men are supposed to, or trying to become like white men or whatever, I think is kind of like, it's a starting question, but it's not the thing. Because even last week, like Blaze was mentioning about how like people in America are trying to become whole, how, it's difficult. The problem is that it's difficult for white men and black men and men and women to know each other, especially, and I think that question was especially important then as now, because how can you get to a democracy if we aren't a whole people? How can we get to a state of the whole people like we talk about in North Korea if we aren't a people, period? And I think that the civil rights movement and those struggles also you can see glimpses of the humanity that is within either side, and both also agree to the fact that each are human beings, which I think is the problem with hip hop. It makes the assumptions that black people are not human. And so black people will take those assumptions.
Or a second-class humanity,
Right.
a second-class citizen. Well, I can abuse you
Right.
because you're nothing but a black woman.
Exactly.
But then that proves that it's a white invention, because that then comes straight out of the whole 3/5 compromise.
Can I ask you a
Black
question?
people aren't humans; they're
Yeah.
3/5
Right.
of a human.
That's right.
Right.
Well, could I ask this question then? Could it be a quote? I was going to say a residue
That's a good word.
of past oppression.
I think that's the perfect way to put
That
it.
indeed, could you find a equivalent figure, let's say, to a little Jeezy on a plantation in Mississippi in 1840? Maybe you could. Maybe that type of character
Serafina's face is so funny right now.
is a product of a special kind of oppression. The next question, okay, let's grant that
Okay.
that it is, quote, black, and it is black in the sense of a manifestation of the brutality of black oppression.
Yeah.
Now, I'm certain Minister Abdul Haq is making that argument.
Yeah.
That we in the Nation of Islam see our fallen brothers and sisters who have fallen under the hammer and the whip of the white oppressor. Okay, let's make that argument. But then, then you could say, it's in keeping with that argument that white people would promote the coon, yada, 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 as his symbol of blackness, because that then justifies whiteness and white supremacy. Look at them.
Yeah.
This is an abnormal people who should be controlled.
Right.
Which is a propaganda they already had without hip hop.
That's right, without hip hop.
Hey, that's how.
But then popular culture was always resisting it.
Right.
I mean, a lot of it, you know what I'm saying? where, I remember in the 70s, there were a lot of demonstrations against blaxploitation film.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of,
Right.
and a lot of those actors and producers and stuff, they were highly insulted.
Wow.
We could have made money. We could have been further ahead in Hollywood had these protests not occurred.
Yeah.
But the argument was that you are presenting us not as the people we are, but some stereotype.
It's a minstrelsy.
Yeah. But so, okay, let us say that type existed.
Mhm.
Certainly, there's nowhere in the world that we can say that black men raping black women did not occur on plantations. We knew there was breeding. All of that went on. So, yeah, it's going to produce all kinds of types. But then what is the responsibility of the revolutionary artist?
Right.
Exactly.
Do we say, well, they're oppressed and the white man has produced this type of Negro and all that kind of shit? Or do we say in no uncertain terms, this must end?
Right.
I mean, were there black murderers on plantation? Certainly.
I mean,
Were there probably serial killers on plantations? So, but we got them today, killing and shit. Do we say because it existed on a plantation that explains it and that makes us No, I think we have to say the killing is wrong.
yes, that's exactly what. Yeah, I agree with that.
This is the enemy of the people.
Yes.
That type of thing. I think the same. I think in some way we have to go back to our greatest music as part of a great cultural revolution. Now, if hip hop can be reimagined, reconfigured to speak in the humanistic terms, let us say of the music of the church, let us say of John Coltrane, of all of that, you know what I'm saying? Then we're working with something. But how can I work as a revolutionary, as a radical, with something that is, okay, I won't say it better because somebody told me, what about Rakim?
No, say it.
Okay. I'm trying to, shield myself from the criticism.
No, we're
okay.
not.
I mean, I think it is something so different qualitatively from the logic and history of Black musical artistic creation. It's almost, it does not have a connection to it. I could be wrong about this show.
No,
Dave.
I don't
No,
think
I
it's
don't
a
think you're
matter
wrong at
of.
all.
I don't think it's a matter of you being wrong. I'm trying to think right now to, like in the 70s when MCs and rappers started. How
MC Hammer?
No, MCs like master of ceremonies. That's what they
Oh,
call it.
I'm
That's
MC.
what they call
Okay,
it,
yeah.
DJs
Oh,
and rappers.
okay.
But I'm trying to think to how they actually would take records of
Yeah.
the love songs of that time and then rap over them. So I'm trying to think like what was the origin of that, like that origin of taking something that we're talking about right now that is a thesis of love within the Black community and then saying things over it. And then the things that they were saying, predominantly Black men that were rappers, I'm not sure if it was as exploitative as it is now, but it felt more of just like an ego like game of like I can just show you how cool I can make words sound. And, and then it just started to develop from there. And it's like the only thing that comes from egoism is more egoism. And then once hip hop became not a culture but a system, that's when, whenever the first rap album was made, it wasn't made with instruments. And then that's when it became a product of white culture. It's like white capitalists were like, oh, we can make money off of this, cool. And now it's like, you don't even have your own writers in there now. You don't even have your own. So it's not, you know what I mean? Like there's a whole orchestration behind it. And that's what I mean by the whole grace argument is giving, I'm not saying that we sit here and just let them say what they want to say and not hold them accountable. It's giving ourselves more layers to understand where all this is coming from, because it's not just a one-headed snake. It's like it's really like a Medusa of a factory. I feel like there's just like all of these elements that people don't it's all these elements that people don't understand, and they won't understand if they choose to just be mad at that one head of the snake, if that makes sense.
Well, just to entertain the argument, because I think that we can understand this better in process and as we continue studying. But I will say two things. Like, part of me wants to be like, I totally agree with Doc. Like, at the end of the day, we're at a certain stage in the crisis, and like, it's like I was saying before, or similar to what I was saying before. It makes more sense for me to say what the truth is, rather than to kind of go down any wormholes and things like that. But another side of me,
rather than to compromise,
like I don't,
for the sake of
personal, guilt or anything. It's not. I don't have time for it. But okay, so I'm an artist. I know a lot of people who make music, and I can see it clear as day how depressed some of these musicians are. I talk about it. We've talked about it before. So to that, and to the other layers that you're talking about, yes, it's complicated. We're all human. That's part of the whole thing that at least I'm in this for. And so when I think about them and like, okay, what is the purpose in which you make music? Well, why is it that you want to make it? Obviously, it's an impulse, so you have to. There's something that you need to do, so do it. It's your job. So like, I'm not to me, like I said, I'm not at a person above. I'm not above anybody. I'm not below anybody. What I stand for is not a matter of opinion, but it's a matter of what is right, in a larger sense, for all of humanity. And things that are basically true are just, like things like love, like that's a true concept. The things like motherhood, that's a true concept. And what I mean also by true is like something that is concrete and real, and that everybody can understand and feel. And so like, it's just like, and you kind of have this, as an artist, for me, and also this is because of the examples that we've looked at all these many years with Baldwin in particular. And there are a lot of artists, but I think because it's not just like we are dogmatic around James Baldwin, but I think it's just because of what he's able to do and how he's able to stand for the truth. It makes it his life and what he says a very obvious example for this point that I'm trying to make about what it is or what happens to you as a human being when you stand up for right. You know what I mean? Like, there's a certain responsibility at the end of the day, and you can't compromise with it, or you're compromising everything you did in the past, and you're basically telling yourself that you've been lying to yourself if you do compromise. And so, like, the stakes are high, and I think that the Free School is a very important political organization, not just in this country. At this point, and I think that when it comes to the questions about what Doc just said, a cultural renaissance, that's also something that can occur if we continue being on task. And so that's why I'm like, it's better just to say the truth than to
For us, it's not an option. I mean, maybe for others, they can, fudge it a little bit. I don't think for us, given the way we have developed, I mean, this gets into the whole question of the free school, which we can also discuss next week. But I think the 10th anniversary charted a course forward for us that made a lot of things clearer, but also established what our responsibility, what our tasks are, and what our moral duty is. Because I don't think, we've never, and certainly not now, defined ourselves as some disengaged academics or theorists. I think that everything, the way we talk about everything is so influenced to me as I observe us from the 10th anniversary. And Sade, I will, and others, I'll tell you all, we were not like this 5 years ago. We were not. We were good, but not like this. This is a whole new level. And of course, it took the year of Du Bois, the year of Gandhi, the China conferences. Just the India Independence Conference. All of this has made us something very different. And I guess I'll just say this, and people should understand it. We were older and blacker. The vast majority were black. We had Indians, but there were no East Asians, no Chinese, no Koreans. We did have Brandon, who was a Vietnamese, but it was black, it was older. People were old age-wise, it was an older group. But it did not, the free school did not have the capacity that it has today. It does not. It did not, I'll put it that way. And this is something I am always involved in thinking about. This younger group of people, it cracks me up. What am I doing with all these young people?
Oh, hey, young boy.
Yeah, okay. So we try to talk better.
Oh, hey, young boy.
No, that is exactly what
I don't know that side of you, true that. But anyway.
Good night.
But I know people leave the free school. Many people, or some people, have left based on criticisms of me.
Wait.
I won't get into all the details.
Don't start.
We'll talk about this privately. I've been accused of being everything but a child of God.
That's a trend, huh?
Yeah. That's why I like that song by Donnie McClurkin, Stand, man. No matter what happens, stand. But, and, all kinds of arguments. When the free school was damn near all black, you found a reason not to come, So, the question is, what do you want? You left the free. Now what do you do? Yeah. And in most cases, nothing. But then this is, I think, the more I think about it, this is the best time for your generation. It's kind of the worst of times, but it is the best of times. Because this is a time where things are clearer. I know it's clearer for you all than maybe ever in your lives recently, But I think your generation is coming to moments of clarity that were not the case previously. Now, of course, when we go to the Church of the Overcomer, there are not a lot of young people there. There are not a lot of young people in many churches, in most churches, even when we go to the mosque. they're not like young people. They're not 20-somethings like you're. You know, if they're young, they're in their 30s and 40s and stuff like that. But probabilities are you all will be a different kind of generation ideologically, which then puts you all in a very, very important, I would say even decisive position. You know, a few people knowing what you all know can have a tremendous impact upon people generally, young people in particular. To me, it seems so clear that that is where we are going. But I think we're so defined by the 10th anniversary.
Yeah.
And it literally did take 2 weekends to do it. And we still didn't finish it. So it's going to take everything that happens in this next few months. But you know, our language is different than it was before the 10th anniversary.
That's true.
The idea, you know, and it makes a lot of sense of a fourth American Revolution. I think it makes all the sense in the world. It, you know, it does. I mean, we do, I think, you know, we do have a great confidence in what the US people can achieve. That's why anything that lowers their capacity should be criticized. In the same way that, you know, Mao and those would criticize art that did not advance the liberation struggle. Remember you gave that presentation on Mao, I think on art, when we were at the Paul Robeson House?
Yes. I don't remember what I said in it.
But you do remember giving
I
it.
do remember giving it.
And it was using Mao on art and literature?
Yeah, I just remember one quote.
Go ahead.
2 quotes. Well, yeah. Well, I think I didn't know what I know now, but I do remember talking about, Mao said something where he said, when I was in college, I thought that you would be the smartest and best if you were a college student or a college professor with clean hands and clean clothes. And he said, and then I realized from the liberation movement that it's the peasants who have wrinkled hands and dirty feet, muddy feet, that they are the ones who hold beauty. He said that. And then I remember also using a quote from Paul Robeson, where Paul Robeson said, I believe that there's a universal fountain of humanity that can be found in the folk music of people around the whole world.
Yeah.
And that's where beauty comes from.
That is awesome.
Whoa.
Yeah. I don't remember how I put them together.
But you put it together, that's so good.
You remember that whole
Yeah. But I do remember that quote from Mao being really beautiful. I remember back then I didn't understand the Cultural Revolution yet, but I had been taught to really hate Mao and hate China because of the culture. I do remember that. I remember feeling really scared to talk about Mao at the Paul Robeson House. But I remember reading that quote, which is from his speech on art and literature at Yan'an. I should probably revisit and study better.
Yeah.
But I remember him saying that one thing about, like, just the way.
But you know something, we have to revisit it because we do have to get our vision statement together for the Paul Robeson and Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Actually, that's
let's keep thinking about that. And I remember, do you remember this? You read the words of John Coltrane.
Oh, yeah.
I remember that.
Oh my God,
I
Michelle was
wish-
so nervous or something.
You remember that?
I remember you from that too. I didn't know you.
So, yeah.
No, you didn't.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
funny.
and your hair was short.
Yeah.
It was short.
Yeah, and it was cute.
Not the hair, but like.
Oh, yeah, your hair was shorter. I remember you said the phrase, you used the phrase, like, a slice of, like,
That was so
like
weird.
what is it? Slice
No,
of
no.
pie, slice of history,
No,
slice of...
That's last one.
You
I think it's a
used the
way-
metaphor.
yeah.
She said, Stop exposing.
No, but it
me.
was nice. I liked it.
Okay.
No, that was very
Yeah, the
important.
reading was good too.
Yeah, that,
You read
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Wait,
No,
I
it
just wanted
does.
to say
Mhm.
something really quick in regards to like the culture and also, or the culture of the times of Mao and like I guess what people, the West especially calls it as like propaganda in a bad way.
Yeah.
But when I was in Hong Kong, I went to, well, Hong Kong's not the best, but but when I went to Hong Kong, they did have an exhibit at the art museum of like the propaganda posters of that time, and they were so beautiful. And so I like took down a picture, but even the title of one of the posters was titled "I graze horse for my motherland."
Say that
I
again.
graze horse for my motherland. As in like,
Racist.
as in like, I raise horse, like the horse that essentially helps like on the plantation, on the not a plantation, on the farm.
Yeah.
That's okay, Alice. It's okay.
My bad, every time. But it's like, you know, because a lot of these posters were like the focus of these posters were workers and peasants and farmers, and it's similar to was it like the Works Progress Administration and like featuring like workers and like they're seen as, you know, they are working, they look very beautiful, they're very big and majestic, and seeing that as part of contributing to society. But I just like wanted to bring it up because I remember I was like looking at all the titles and also the posters, and they were so, like they were these gigantic blown up ones, and
Damn.
all the titles were really beautiful.
That sounds really pretty.
I feel
Yeah.
like propaganda posters have been so like memeified
Yeah.
almost,
Oh,
and then it's
gosh.
never seeing it on a screen of like your phone or
Political
computer is
cartoon.
never the same as I can only imagine how beautiful it was. Yeah.
I kind of connected to well, even though the aesthetics are really different from even like artists like Jacob Lawrence or Romare Bearden, I kind of always connected, I guess, that stuff together with, there's this one quote from Coretta Scott King's biography, her first one, where she talks about how Daddy King, whenever Martin Luther King would speak, and whenever Daddy King was really moved, he would say one phrase, he would say, "Make it plain." And there's something about that I really like got attached to, this thing of like, when something is so resonant, beautiful, getting to the truth, he says, "Make it plain, make it plain."
Yeah.
You know, there's
Yeah.
something about that, you know what I mean? And like,
Yeah.
even though the aesthetics are different, like between the Chinese propaganda posters and then someone like Jacob Lawrence, or even like Horace Pippin, who was always like, "I don't like when people call my art primitive because they don't get what I'm trying to do." It's like this thing of like, make it plain, make the truth plain. Like, you know, I don't know, I was connected to that phrase. All right, Serafini gets it.
Yeah.
Explain.
Okay. What do you want me to explain? You said it right, because it's when the truth is like what I said, just basic.
You said it was
things that-
concrete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The base. It's the simple. It's not in the overly complex or over complicated. Yeah, you already said it.
Or the way Robeson, how Robeson was like, I forget the details of what he said, but he was like, truth doesn't have to be so abstract. Truth can be a mother and child.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's in the, and that's when you get the symbols and everything like that. The things that are just true in humanity. That's why the human, that's a symbol, but it's a true thing. Something that everybody knows, everybody understands, not out of a more or less intellectual way, but they could just feel, like, it's a part of an intuitive, it's a part of an emotional, spiritual thing. But that's also what's important about, I guess, it all, like with free school, what we're studying, the truth and fighting for the truth. That not only does all of humanity understand what we're saying and find it as important, meaning that if we do stand up for what is actually principled and not compromise, then that's also valued regardless of, regardless of where the other person will come from or whom they know or whatever. The basic things is true. Like, yes, we need freedom. We need freedom of thought, freedom of will, freedom of understanding. We need the actuality of my own manhood and womanhood, and to have that in decency and respect with one another, human beings, that everybody is all wrapped in a single garment of destiny, and so on. These things are true, and fighting for these
These
things.
things are true.
No,
I'm sorry,
serious.
I'll just repeat this.
No, fighting for these things and struggling for these things. This is why we're talking about. Okay, this is a world system. The fact that everybody is in touch with this. That's why it's important, and that's why we struggle for
Sarah,
it.
could you remember that phrase when we write the vision statement? These things are true.
That's easy for everybody to remember.
Well, I'll never forget it. We want to get that in the vision statement. These things are true.
It sounds like a declaration.
Yes, it is. My point.
That's part of the point.
My point. These things are true.
Yeah.
And I think that says something about us, and it says something about us to the people that we're talking to, that we are prepared to stand up and say, these things are true.
Right.
These things are true. Let's work with that idea.
No problem, Doc.
That's a beautiful, it's a simple phrase, but so powerful.
I agree.
Like they say in the Declaration, we hold
Yeah.
these truths.
Yeah.
So it's even more powerful to say these things are true.
Yeah.
That's another thing I was thinking about.
See, now I'm gonna have to
My
put
mind-
that like you do, like you say the first word, then I have to put the second part of the
Of
phrase.
course. Oh my God, shut up.
That's the way she and I work.
Wait.
You never see the way we do that.
Okay, another thing I did realize,
Mhm.
is the advancement of thought, like
Oh,
in
yeah.
different periods. And I was thinking about how, like, King was also saying how, we get a soap from China and all of a sudden,
Yeah.
at the end of our breakfast, we're in touch with the rest of the world. We go, and so, but that's a truth that was a constant in different, like, I think Gandhi knew this, Mao knew this, like, I think a lot of, like, that was in the what's the right, it's not worldview, what's the right word that you use sometimes, it's the
What does that have to do with this?
it has to do with the house, like, it's like the
Consciousness.
like the thing of the world, like the time, the energy of the world, like
Oh,
the
the
spirit of the times,
zeitgeist.
like the spirit of the times.
Spirit of that, yeah.
Let's
mhm,
go.
mhm.
Yeah, that
Mhm.
and so that's what I was also just. This is a side note because this probably has nothing to do with anything, but yeah. No, I was just thinking about that how in the spirit of the times that's something that was true, and I'm just thinking about how when you're talking about punctuated equilibrium and stuff. Last week I was like, oh man, he only drops bombs when it's important, and so. It's not a bomb. I'm not really putting you up on a pedestal, Doc. Don't do it.
Oh,
And so basically, what I'm trying to say is that, the purpose of human endeavors is to advance it to a better position. And I think the human endeavor, like even if we die, like there's still generation afterwards to help improve. And it goes
The
on and
immortal
on and on.
child.
Yeah, the immortal child. And I was just like,
That's very important to judging art. And in fact, just because it's written that the concept of the immortal child is written in an essay that Du Bois wrote on the African English composer. Coleridge, yeah.
Taylor.
Coleridge Taylor, who's a great composer. In fact, his music is still on records that are sold today. And he died at Hiawatha, yes, and he died at 37. And Du Bois was reflecting upon his life and his death because Du Bois did not believe in death as finality.
Right.
He believed in immortality and how do we become immortal, that which we all wish to become. And he had this, it is in that immortality, that our immortality is rooted in the child. We should go back to that and think about, for a part, as we go forward to the Elijah Muhammad, Paul Robeson, because the immortal child is, because if we don't celebrate the immortality of the child, there is no future.
It's not. It's not.
I can do anything. What difference does it make?
Right. It makes a difference in the world.
And you tell me a child that doesn't want a parent as a moral guide.
Yeah.
You tell me one, even if they don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem of alcoholism in families and drug addiction. The moral anchorage, no matter how weak, but it's not there any longer. Yeah, but I'm sorry.
I mean, the
Okay,
only thing I
that's
was
what I'm
getting
saying.
at is that, like, part of what a free school does is
Mhm.
help advance that human endeavor,
Mhm.
which is like it's like sharpening the zeitgeist, or a better word, the spirit of the times. I forget the right word.
No, both are the same.
And then helping clarify what is the actual spirit, so that human beings can actually further the real endeavors of science, art, philosophy,
Yeah.
everything that humans are able to achieve and do, civilization itself. That's what I really think. And part of what free school does is help save civilization. I really think that. So
There's no question. And especially to have the language of the young generation.
yeah.
I know we were talking about the 10th anniversary, but I just wanted to read 3 comments quickly.
Okay.
Brandon clarifies that Brother Abdul Haq said that we went from the Supremes and the Miracles to calling ourselves N-words with attitudes. And then Philip Logan says, hip hop has its historical material conditions. It's the music of Black post-modernity.
Well, I would say, and Phil is my man. Phil, I would say that's academics have been to justify, quote, hip hop studies, end quote, as a substitute for the study of, let us say, Du Bois or Baldwin, whatever, or of Ellington and Stevie Wonder, whatever. Is it, and I asked Phil this question, is it the music of a zeitgeist? Are they the canaries in the mine? Are they announcing disaster? Or, and the other thing is, just like, are they announcing an end time, an apocalypse? So should we see them in a prophetic sense? I disagree with that. And there have always been, under capitalism, these types of anti-social movements. For example, in Germany after World War I, you got surrealism. You got the Dadaist movement. So what is Dada? Dada? I don't know. It's a movement in art called Dadaism. There were many such movements of despair. The only difference is that trillions of dollars were available to invest in the distribution of a movement, an ideological movement, and propaganda that did not elevate the capacity of Black folk. Did not. I don't think we can say that. And if it does not elevate the capacity of struggle, then who does it serve? Whose interest? I would say to Phil, we got to ask some other questions than just this from a historical materialist point of view. This is the music of postmodernity. I've heard cats say that, just like Afrofuturism and Afropessimism. I mean, it's what are you saying about Africans? That we have no future, that there is no revolutionary possibility. That's what it's saying. So all of this is wrong. Du Bois is certainly wrong. King is wrong. Now I'm back to your phrase, this we know is true. What do we know? What do we know? And knowing these things, what does it say? What does it compel us to do? Yeah, we could be armchair analyst, and you talk about there's a difference between counter-revolutionary and revolutionary propaganda. That's why I look forward, hopefully, for the Robeson Honorable Elijah Muhammad event. We can have some of those posters, if we can reproduce some of them. And Kathy knows best. Where that can be to say that we celebrate the 125th birthday of these two giants as we call for a new cultural revolution, a renaissance of the people and their culture. And it has to be called for, I think. I mean, there's no greater revolutionary responsibility than to liberate, especially the young generation, from the propaganda of this cruel and vicious ruling class. For them to do to young people and children what they're doing, to sexualize children, and that's what they do. And think about it. We've all been children. One of the things, I don't know a child that wants images of, that's not what they're feeling. That's not what they're feeling. So to promote this is a cruel thing. And I think we have to say, and I think the theme now, it seems, of the Robeson Honorable is the great cultural revolution that is before us,
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay, so speaking of cultural revolution, Todd Doherty says, Eddie from Midwestern Marx creates some outstanding Marxist Leninist content on TikTok. Yeah. His name's Eddie Liger. Actually, it popped up on my Twitter algorithm. I know we didn't get into the Twitter files, but
What is the Twitter files?
I'm going to explain.
listen next week. Next week, yeah.
Oh,
But anyways, and then Pat. This is Pastor Keith says. This is from Philippians.
Yeah, Philippians.
Philippians 4:8. Quote: Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of a good report. If there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. End quote. And then,
Think on these things.
yeah. And then Pastor Keith says revolutionary vision of truth in the purest of things.
I think Pastor Keith gonna make me come to church tomorrow with
Yay!
y'all. Look, this chill. Go ahead.
That is so
Chill.
interesting.
There's nothing. There's no chilling on Christmas weekend. What?
No, you can't. No, you have to be with good people.
I thought we were gonna get lunch after this.
After this?
Yeah.
Yeah, we will.
Okay.
We're gonna watch a movie.
Okay,
No.
well, I want to go to the Twitter files. Is that all right?
Do you
So
have?
much time. Yeah, it's like
Do you think you
No,
can?
but she doesn't have to go to work. So we can stay a little longer.
Lunchtime. I'm sure you don't want to do Twitter files.
We can talk.
Yeah.
We can talk about that later. I'll
Well,
figure it out.
I don't know if you should do Twitter files right now because I just saw they released more Twitter files 28 minutes ago.
Could I just say a couple of things about
Yeah,
it?
okay.
It's very, very important, the Twitter files.
What about?
And they were released. It's just, when Elon Musk took over Twitter, and one of the reasons I don't think they wanted him to is because there were a lot of secrets about Twitter's relationship to the government and the deep state, and how Twitter was involved in the 2020 campaign on the side of Biden and the Democrats. And it was it's just a huge thing. And as you know, social media is more powerful than traditional media, you know? And as you say, algorithms and other things, but just out and out erasure of certain topics. For instance, the Joe Biden, Hunter Biden thing with their relationship with Ukraine. And if that had become a issue, who knows what the election would have looked like. And certainly it would have been a warning that if elected, we're talking about 2020, Biden would put the nation on course to a war with Russia over Ukraine. People say, well, how do you say that? How do you say that? Well, what is the war in Ukraine about? Yes, it's about NATO. Yes, it's about the placement of NATO weapons in the Ukraine, not that far from Russia's capital, all of that. But it's also about maintaining Ukraine as a neo-colony of the financial elite of the United States. You know, and thus a linchpin, a point for the financial and information penetration of Russia in as part of the possibility of overthrowing the present government. You know, in other words, Ukraine would be more than just a member of NATO and the EU. Oh, all he wants is to be a member of NATO, and he has that right. And you want me to be a part of that. One, so you can continue to make money off of it, and that's what Biden was saying, and that's what his son is about. And the Burisma, the energy company. So they blacked that out. But Twitter was doing this and adjusted its algorithms from what we see from these files being released. And Emily say more files are going to be released, but at the instigation and direction of the government and the security state forces, like the FBI, like Homeland Security, yada, yada, yada. So, okay, that's just a glimpse into the connection that the deep state, and by deep state we mean the state, the real state, has to social media. Besides, everything they do with us in algorithms, so I can't, if I post something, you might not see it. Although we're friends and share things on Facebook or Twitter, and the whole nine. But here's what I wanted to raise. Remember, I talked a lot, I wrote about Ibram Kendi, Ibram X. Kendi. Everybody remember that? He wrote the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And then he wrote another book where he got a National Book Award called Stamped from the Beginning, or Stamped from the Start, which when you read it is not original research at all. So then he goes from a college in Florida to George Washington University within a matter of months. And then he writes this book entitled How to Be an Anti-Racist, which is a complete disaster. I wrote a review of it in Black Agenda Report. if you want to, you can read it. But at any rate, he goes from George Washington University, and Georgetown and George Washington are universities where the FBI and the CIA play a huge role. In other words, it's their home university. But then he writes this book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, a disaster. Nobody that does race studies, and since the civil rights movement or during, that whole period, hundreds of thousands of books and articles and research articles, are written on race, the civil rights movement, the Black question. It's just, and many genuine and sincere scholars and writers have taken this up. It's the problem of the 20th century, to quote Du Bois. Suddenly we have this book written by a so-called progressive, published, where the author makes the claim that Black people are as racist as anybody. So wait a minute. What did you say? No researcher, I don't know of any standing in social science or history have made such a claim. Suddenly, in a matter of a year and a half, he's now invited to be a professor at Boston University. But not just a professor, and not just a full professor with tenure. Okay, if that weren't enough, but he's a chaired professor. In other words, he holds a chair, a prestigious chair at Boston University, which prior to him had only been held by one other person, Elie Wiesel, the cold-blooded and brutal Zionist who talked a lot of shit. You know what I'm saying?
Sorry, no, I was just reacting to what you're saying.
Yeah. Now, he hadn't settled in well at Boston University before Joe Dorsey, the co-founder of Twitter,
Jack Dorsey,
gives him $10 million. Now, in the world of business and high-tech investment, and all, that ain't a lot. But in the world of academics, $10 million to set up a so-called Institute of Anti-Racist Studies. I raise that to say this. I suspected from the very beginning that this guy had been chosen and it had been negotiated, that in the period of Trump and of the Black Lives Matter and all of this, that the ruling class would decide through its surrogates the trajectory and essence of the discussion on race. And they would, whatever the cost was, make their people, as they say, their Black people, the representatives of this discourse. And Kendi was the man. It could not, he was a student of mine when he was a graduate student. And I'm trying to figure this out. I mean, there are academics that work all of their lives to get what this cat gets in 2 years. And based upon bogus work. You understand what I'm saying? For example, he says, either you're a racist or you're an anti-racist. So the next question is, well, what makes you a racist?
If you do racist things.
Huh?
If you do racist things.
No, it's not even that deep. It's you're a racist if you support racist policies. And you say, well, money, what makes me an anti-racist? If you support anti-racist policy. So I'm saying, well, everybody, wait a minute, come on, money. How can you? Okay, so it's a matter. Now, who decides what is a racist and an anti-racist policy? So what it is a setup to support anything the Democratic Party and Democratic candidates do. And hence, Joe Dorsey. Joe Dorsey didn't know Ibram Kendi. Huh? Jack? Okay, Jack. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I thought he was right anyway. It doesn't matter.
Okay, well, Jack, I don't know why I call him Joe. You know, Jack Dorsey did not know Ibram Kendi, as they say, from Buster or from a can of paint. Yeah. And he could not have known him from his scholarly endeavors.
Yeah.
So he had to be directed to him. Now, Twitter, FBI, Deep State, Ibram Kendi, you know what I'm saying? I am suggesting that it was the Deep State that promoted Kendi, and that what to me kind of finalized what the deal was this thing with Dorsey and Twitter. That's all I wanted to say. And so we can do more with the Twitter file. But you want to say anything, Emily?
Well, no, the one thing I want to say was that, like, I feel like there are a lot of, whenever people bring up these connections, like I refound Ibram Kendi's tweet where he was like, thanks at Jack, which is Jack Dorsey's Twitter. Thanks at Jack for $10 million, no strings attached. Like he just straight up said that in his tweet. He was
That's
like,
not
thanks, he said thanks at Jack for your $10 million donation, comma, with no strings attached.
He said no strings
attached. With no strings attached. He was like, to help us to build our anti-racist center. Because Ibram Kendi has at BU, he's not just a chaired professor, which is very difficult to get. Because being a chaired professor means like basically it's almost impossible to oust you. You have it for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And also it's like paid a lot of money.
Yeah.
But he also there's a center at BU called the Anti-Racist Center. The other significance of that is that BU is also the home of the Martin Luther King Jr. papers and center.
No.
Oh, sorry.
No,
BU has it has something.
Something. You're right. You're right about that.
Because that's where what's his face? I forget. There's a famous Kenyan person there, professor, and they're like BU is very proud. Like they have this legacy.
Of course, King graduated from there, got his PhD.
Oh yeah, but there's a lot of people who are probably like, oh, these are all conspiracy theories. But the significance of the Twitter files is that Matt Taibbi, along with other journalists, they literally are like, they will give you a whole set of evidence of emails, like emails from showing the connection between literally explicitly FBI agents, CIA agents, and tech, Twitter executives, admins, like Reddit, Facebook, all these tech companies talking to each other over email, literally saying, oh, like, can you please find a connection between Russia and the elections and these Twitter accounts? And then you'll see Twitter employees emailing back saying, still cannot find a connection, but we will keep brainstorming. Like, it's literally email showing that. So it's basically, the whole point is that all these people constantly using the word conspiracy theorist to say, anyone who tries to make any connection between the deep state and like social media, anything, like it's just completely exposing that anything is like all these things that the people already suspect, you can just instinctively expect. It's true. We're not conspiracy theorists. There's proof. And Yeah, there's a good Netflix documentary that Nanda had recommended to me about social media, showing how algorithms work and how basically it's true. It's not conspiracy theory. Social media algorithms are literally made in their code to affect human behavior. And like the documentary explains how they do that. Like it's things like the algorithm is meant to automatically sense that if you, an Instagram user, for example, are no longer, like if they can tell that you're no longer like looking at your screen, they'll purposely like send you a notification saying like a notification primed for you and your interest to say like, oh, we want you to come back on. Like it's a way the algorithm evolves too, so they know, they get a sense of what will tempt you. Like, and so in some ways,
And literally, like, we missed you. Here's 53.
Yeah, in a sense, it honestly is. It's literally like the devil. It's like, it's literally like an evolved devil that knows exactly how to use your sin against you. Like that's the algorithm. And so, anyways, the Twitter files are deep. There's like a bunch. Like, I feel like it's worth going into.
Yeah, we should go next week.
Yeah, next week.
Get more into it.
There'll probably be more of us.
But I was just trying to make an argument about how the deep state had penetrated the universities, that they were deciding who would be prestigious professors, and it was based upon the ideology of those people. And one of the things about Kendi that I exposed, okay, you don't want to go have lunch with us?
I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Okay, all right, okay.
I want to go watch a movie.
I'm gonna give you a call here, Michelle.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. But yes, how it had penetrated the university, and how the Midwest Marxists talk about this iron triangle
Okay,
of universities, what they call nonprofits, and what is the other? Huh?
Media.
No, I think they said the state. Maybe, I think
That's
those.
what you said earlier, but
Maybe the media, maybe it is the media, but it obviously the universities are not places of free discussion and discourse and so on.
Yeah, that's I always actually ask myself, why is it that there has been a phenomena of professors on Twitter? Yeah, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's not just leftists, there's a whole, Twitter is like, it's a new thing that happened a few years ago where if you're a young professor trying to make it, that like, it was well known that you should create a Twitter profile and basically start tweeting a lot, because like, you're more likely to get jobs if you're like on Twitter and like.
What?
Yeah, I noticed it. I remember when we were about to graduate college, that's when I feel like it's really started exploding.
That's interesting.
How did you know it's exploded? I mean, what?
Because my whole Twitter feed out of nowhere started being Twitter handles saying like Dr. Chanda something. It'd like literally be like professors where they're like, I'm a professor at this place. Like I actually never questioned it. I was like, it's because people like Twitter. But no, actually I think there is a connection. And I never heard of that phrase iron triangle.
Yeah.
That's where you.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
I think that the phrase iron triangle applied. I forget. It was used in political discourse in the 40s, I think 30s maybe. But they talk about the university social media in the state.
The outside.
No.
Nonprofits,
yeah. And the nonprofits are a central part of this. In a lot of ways, none of it works without the nonprofits, because that's the transmission belt.
Yeah. Okay, one last comment.
Okay.
Phil says, the thing about Twitter which irritates me is that it's a private virtual space that people treat as a substitute for the public sphere. As flawed as Occupy Wall Street was way back when, it at least highlighted the importance of speaking in public, trying to form something of an openly democratic body politic people could participate in. But the Twitter files, as in Elon Musk's tweets about the FBI, are not that remarkable to me. If the FBI is pressuring a private company to control destructive rhetoric by far-right tweeters, they are technically doing their job. To me, this is a certain ideological confusion on the part of people to recognize Twitter as a virtual private space where the labor of speech is exchanged for information for advertisers to sell products based on data collection. But maybe this is a conversation to continue for next week.
Yeah, next week.
Yeah, Twitter files.
So I guess we'll end free school for today.
For
And
the year.
Free school.
Oh no, wait, 31st is a year.
Also, free school continues to Sunday.
yeah,
We're going to the church
Church of the Overcomer.
Yeah. for Christmas.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's going to be nice tomorrow.
Serafina, play us out.
Oh,
I
yeah,
was just about to. I
song.
got y'all.
Are you going to play a song? Oh.
Like you said, I was gonna play it.
We gotta have.
Oh, we are family.
What do you say?
This is his life.
Yes, it's
I don't think I've ever heard a cover of this song.
Never took my coat off.
Yeah.
Y'all dig this?
Y'all like this? Why?
No one stop the lights.
I thought you wanted to hear it.
Well, it's just like this copyright.
You're hating.
I have a-
Don't